Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we will start now. Please take your seats. I call to order the third plenary meeting of the international meeting entitled Stockholm+50, a healthy planet for the prosperity of all, our responsibility, our opportunity. First of all, I would like to thank you all for the yesterday meeting. There were very substantive and very intensive debates with a real leadership. We need leadership, and I would like to also thank all organizers, host country, for the wonderful reception of yesterday evening. This morning, the international meeting will continue hearing statements in the general debate. We still have a long list of speakers, and I wish to remind speakers of the time limits of 3 minutes for national statements and 5 minutes for statements delivered on behalf of groups. Speakers with longer statements are encouraged to read a shorter version of their text and to submit the full statement to the Secretariat for posting on the meeting website. To assist speakers in managing this time, their time, a timer is being projected on the screen. In case speakers exceed the time limit, the microphone will be automatically deactivated after 1 minute. I apologize in advance if speakers are cut off. This measure is being taken to ensure that all speakers can deliver their statements in the limited time available for the general debate. My name is Borbély László. I am State Councillor in the Prime Minister's Office in Romania, and I am in charge to implement Agenda 2030 in Romania. A very easy task. So let's continue. I now give the floor to His Excellency Orlando Habet, Minister of Sustainable Development, Climate Change and Disaster Risk Management of Belize. Please, Mr. Minister.
Excellencies, colleagues, greetings from Belize. As we speak, planet Earth is undergoing an environmental crisis because we continue to use its resources without regard. We know that an unhealthy planet is not conducive to a strong economy and healthy population. We need to be proactive rather than reactive. We need to act now for the good of present and future generations. Respect and support intergenerational solidarity. Like many other countries present here today, Belize is a party to several multilateral environmental agreements which have assisted us tremendously in meeting the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly in protecting the health of our people and biodiversity, which is indicative of some of the positive outcomes of Stockholm 1972 until present. As a small, developing but ambitious nation and having a natural resources-based economy, we continue to experience socio-economic growth pains as we continue seeking to create a balance between environmental protection and economic growth. However, Belize will continue to do its part in tackling the triple planetary crisis through partnership and collaboration. In this room, we have the brightest of minds. If we decide today to put our differences aside and join our efforts to make our planet healthy for the prosperity of all, we can achieve the objectives of our many commitments and agreements. If we can then take the concept of unity and of solidarity to solve our issues, recognize the intergenerational responsibilities, and spread it everywhere, we could be in a much better place. Belize is doing her part to make a change, and we strongly encourage you to do the same. The BRS conventions are springboards to prosperity for all. We strongly support the concept and actions that stem from true multilateralism, one which will make the responsible pay for the damages they propagate, where GNI will not be the decisive factor for the level of assistance given to vulnerable communities, but one of equity, one of need and vulnerability, of respective capabilities, and of justice. While we work together to fight the triple planetary crisis, we cannot allow for nature's advocates to be hunted down and killed. Let this be embedded into climate justice to protect our youth, our media, and other advocates to express their human rights and the rights of nature. It is here at Stockholm+50 that we commit to accelerate actions for implementation of the SDGs, the relationship between humans and nature, and how we will use the whole of society approach and leaving no one behind. We need those transformative tools that will halt transgressing the planetary boundaries and keep on track with the laws of nature. We need to unlock financing that is necessary to support developing countries to implement and strengthen their climate commitments and resilience needs. It is our responsibility, our opportunity to achieve the bold and urgent action needed to secure a better future on a healthy planet. I thank you.
I thank the Minister of Sustainable Development, Climate Change and Disaster Risk Management of Belize for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Kwaku Afrail, Minister for Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation of Ghana. You have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Ghana is happy to join the global community here in Stockholm, Sweden, to commemorate the 1972 United Nations Conference on Human Environment and celebrate 50 years of global environmental action under the theme Stockholm+50, a healthy planet for prosperity for all and responsibility, our opportunity. We identify with the several statements delivered by earlier speakers regarding the need for urgent and accelerated action in tackling the Earth's triple planetary crisis: climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Like other countries, the climate crisis is adding to the pressures on our natural ecological systems. Critical habitats for rainforests to wetlands continue to be lost through deforestation, logging, overfishing, illegal wildlife trading, and excessive extraction of mineral resources, mainly among small-scale mining. We are also faced with the worsening pollution in all forms, including from hazardous elements or chemicals and e-waste as a result of urbanization, industrialization, and advancement of technology for economic development. These interlinked crises, which are the results of unsustainable use of the planet's resources and unsound environmental practices, are adversely affecting human health, the environment, and massive biodiversity loss. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the 1972 Stockholm Conference challenged the countries to reverse these negative trends and to live in harmony with nature. We cannot say that nothing has not been done, but clearly we have not achieved what our leaders set out for us to do. At the recent COP26, we all agreed to reset the climate agenda, and to this end, Ghana submitted and revised the national determined contributions, setting very ambitious targets at the UNFCCC with over 34 mitigation and adaptation targets. We will continue to forge public-private partnerships for the development and innovation and alternatives to deal with the climate change in the implementation of NDCs by working with countries to implement Article 6 of the Paris Agreement on Emission Trading Framework. Excellencies, it is common knowledge that plastic pollution is an emerging global threat To this end, Ghana has joined other like-minded nations to champion a plastic treaty which will gain global attention, and a resolution adopted at the resumed 5th UNEA meeting in Nairobi, Kenya. A circular economy framework to deal with plastics is underway, whilst a ban on under 20 microns and single-use plastics is being considered. In 2016, Ghana enacted the Hazardous Electronic Waste Control and Management Act with its accompanying legislative instrument to deal with pollution. In addition, a 10-year strategic plan has been on sound management of chemicals and waste has been developed. To leverage on measures to move nations from fossil fuel, Ghana has set up the energy transformation agenda to harness strategies for use of renewable energy. Carbon trading with the Swiss government is far advanced and soon to take effect, with few more countries expressing interest to partner Ghana. Institutional strengthening is in achieving desired transformation.
I thank the Minister for Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation of Ghana for his statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Zakia Katabi, Minister for Climate, Environment, Sustainable Development and Green Deal of Belgium. Madam Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Votre Excellence, permettez-moi de...
Your Excellency, allow me to start by saying that Belgium wishes to associate itself with the statement made by the European Union. So, for a long time, I've asked myself what I could possibly say to you this morning that hasn't been said yet, and which would make a difference. And I reread the statement made by the Prime Minister of Sweden, Olof Palme, during the first opening of the First Assembly 50 years ago. And I must say that the words which he spoke 50 years ago are of painful topicality, as they prompt us to ask us what we have done this far, over these last 50 years.
Around the future of scarcity on this one Earth. Progress continues, yes, and world production increases. But we have become increasingly aware of the fact that our natural resources are limited. We have come to discuss more and more the interrelated problem areas of population, poverty and pollution. And we realize that just as we could not afford the laissez-faire economy, we shall not afford laissez-faire technology. We must naturally be aware of false optimists. Technological forecasts that are little more than quantitative extrapolations of the future can in fact be dangerous if they are allowed to divert us from the real serious problems of the world. But I must also warn for prophetics of inevitable catastrophe. I have seen no convincing evidence that the problems of the human environment and the interconnected problems of food production, population, resource management, and economic growth and distribution could not be solved. I'm certain that solution can be found, but it is absolutely necessary that concerted international action is undertaken. It is indeed very, very urgent. Fin de la citation.
End of quote. Everything was in there already. And more recently in Rio, 30 years ago, we had stated that there is a need to take into account the current concepts of economic growth and the need to elaborate new concepts of wealth and prosperity, which would enable us to achieve living standards which are greater as a result of modified living conditions and which are dependent on the resources of the planet and more in keeping with what the planet can bear. This is something that should be reflected in the new systems of national accountability and accountancy. 30 years later, where do we stand? So for a long time now, we know what needs to be done. And every day, we know a little bit better how to do it. The time has come now to deliver, to step up the rhythm of our work, to intensify our actions. So in each of our statements here today, we have referred to the disastrous consequences of the triple crisis, which is on our agenda. Yes, we have to put an end to it, adapt, substitute, or perhaps slow it down. But we must also raise awareness and punish. And this is why I advocate that the ecocide crime should be included in our laws. We're working on this in our country, and we ask the international community to look at ecocide and include it into European law. I also advocate and champion the prevention of double standards in legislation regarding substances in keeping with the concept of one world, one health. EU member states still export chemical substances which have been banned in the European Union as a result of the problems they cause to health and the environment. Finally, we know that the green transition towards a sustainable world must be a fair one, or there will be no transition. Incorporating the social concept and social justice in an environmental transition is a precondition for its success. And finally, we will never do enough, it is true, but there are anniversaries that we would prefer not to commemorate, and 50 years later, the task remains huge. Let us be optimistic, let us be proactive, and let us not dispute the fact that 50 years old, 50 years of age is the age of reason, and let us prove that we have finally understood. Thank you.
I thank the Minister for Climate, Environment, Sustainable Development and Green Deal of Belgium for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Matthew Samuda, Minister without portfolio at the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation of Jamaica. You have the floor, Mr. Minister.
Excellencies, colleagues, I wish to start by acknowledging the government of Sweden for hosting this very important meeting. I bring you greetings from the small island developing state of Jamaica. The Stockholm+50 international meeting being convened is yet another chance for the global community to take stock while proactively charting the way forward in these unprecedented times. There are many lessons which have been learned over the past 2 years, including the urgent need to close the gap while paying with respect to existing inequalities which have further exacerbated due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Not least of all, the recent geopolitical events have put instability into energy markets, which particularly make this meeting important. Now more than ever, economic recovery and sustained social well-being and environmental resilience must be paramount for all governments and recognized as key pillars in the development and implementation of any global forward-looking agenda. The decoupling of economic growth from environmental impacts is central to sustained growth and development. It is important that we identify the interconnectedness between and among the complex issues of sustainable consumption and production, improving resource efficiency, mitigating and adapting to the impact of climate change, halting and reversing biodiversity loss, all while focusing on poverty eradication. We must actively pursue innovative solutions to these issues. To achieve a net zero, nature-positive world, all stakeholders, including governments, the private sector, civil society, the youth, academia, the scientific community, and indeed the entire multilateral system, will be required to actively engage and play their part in ensuring that environmental considerations are fully integrated into the development process. We do need all hands on deck. The unprecedented challenges of recent times have also highlighted the critical need to continue to build the human capital skill set which underpins sustainable development, not least of all the challenge of developing the skills that we all will need to green our economies. A central issue of this Stockholm+50 international meeting must be the value of genuine and sustained partnerships. These partnerships will be crucial to the global community's achievement of the commitments made at COP26 to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, as well as those that will be made at the 15th Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity, and not least of all, the commitments that indeed will be made at the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon. Indeed, the traditional North-South cooperation must be complemented by increased South-South and triangular cooperation. We must move, colleagues, from ambition to concerted and focused action, and every opportunity must be seized to collectively move forward to achieve our common goal, a healthy planet for the prosperity of all. Let us harness the spirit and energy of that initial meeting in Stockholm 50 years ago as we ensure that the world is what we want. I thank you.
I thank the Minister without portfolio at the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation of Jamaica for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Michael Moussa Adamo, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Gabon. Mr. Minister, you have the floor.
Excellence.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. From 1972 through to today, 50 years of multilateral action in favor of the environment have passed. The celebration here today in Stockholm of this action is a determining understanding of what the situation is. We have but one planet, and our collective well-being depends on it. This constitutes the very essence of mobilization at the highest levels of our states, aimed at facing up to these multifaceted environmental crises. Ladies and gentlemen, my country, Gabon, has participated in all of these fights, and we have shared a common vision, and we have incorporated it into our development. 40 years after Stockholm, the first ministry dedicated to the environment was created in 1976. After 1992, the first environmental code was adopted in 1993. In Johannesburg, in 2002, the late President Omar Bongo announced the creation of 13 national parks, which cover 11% of our national territory.
President Ali Bongo Ondimba was elected on a Sustainable Development Manifesto. For a country that is 88% covered by tropical rainforests, that is the only option if we are to maintain our natural capital while providing for our people. In 2014, 2 years after I attended Rio+20, we passed a Sustainable Development Law. And in the leap up to COP26 in Glasgow, we adopted a climate change law. Shortly after Stockholm+50, we will submit a new NDC committing Gabon to remain carbon neutral to 2050 and beyond. It is in this constant political commitment over 5 decades that has preserved Gabon's status as a high forest, low deforestation country. Indeed, Gabon is one of the rare countries that absorb more carbon dioxide than we emit, net absorbing over 100 million tons of CO2 annually. That is double the annual emission of Sweden. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is true that we have achieved some important successes since Stockholm. Our collective action to restore the one-zone layer is perhaps the best successful story to date. However, many important environmental and special development challenges lie ahead. We need to demonstrate leadership and innovation in our development models. A regulated global carbon market could help us to deal with the common challenges of climate, biodiversity, and sustainable development. This will allow developing countries to decrease our heavy load of debt in exchange for the key environmental services we provide to the global economy. Innovation is needed to develop financial mechanisms to promote biodiversity and ecosystem services and to integrate natural capital into our national balance sheets. In the spirit of Stockholm, we must work together constructively to solve these challenges and build a better and more sustainable world. I thank you.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Gabon for his statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Leila Chikawi Madawi, Minister of Environment of the Republic of Tunisia. Madam Minister, you have the floor.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, I should like to make this statement on behalf of the Prime Minister of the government of Tunisia, Secretary General, Madam Prime Minister, Madam Executive Director of UNEP, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government. I would like to start by presenting my gratitude to Sweden for the invitation made to us to participate in this meeting. It is no surprise that the country of Dag Hammarskjöld, which was behind the creation of the United Nations peacekeeping forces, should be the country which guides us on the way in which we are to achieve the objectives of the Programme of Action of 2030. We cherish the hope that through this meeting we will be successful in achieving such a green future. So what we need to do here is to save this planet on which all of us live. Our health and our prosperity depend on the well-being of the planet. Tunisia has followed all of the guidelines which have been issued, or which were issued by the 1972 Stockholm Conference. And we have always granted priority to the environment. We have made the right to a healthy environment a constitutional right. We've also worked for the sustainable management of our resources, and we have reviewed and updated a number of our national policies and structures, with as its objective to optimize our environmental action in the country. We're also currently elaborating a framework law which should enable us to have a comprehensive approach when it comes to the environment. Tunisia would like to state how important it is that efforts in this field be stepped up and bolstered at an international level to ensure that a global approach is adopted involving all stakeholders in the private sector, women's associations, youth associations, all of us together coming up with creative solutions which are implementable in real life. And we also call for an exchange regarding state-of-the-art technology and information, and we urge all states to meet their obligations as this is necessary for adaptation and mitigation efforts in the face of climate change. We would also like this to be seen as climate investments, investments in our environment, which would enable us to achieve this green future. I should also like to here quote what the Prime Minister said: "Let's make Tunisia green again."
I thank the Minister of Environment of the Republic of Tunisia for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Collins Ndlovu, Minister of Green Economy and Environment of Zambia. Mr. Minister, you have the floor.
Your Excellencies, heads of states and government, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, in a special way, I bring fraternal greetings from President Hakainde Hichilema and the great people of Zambia, who jointly express their profound gratitude to the government and people of Sweden for the warm hospitality and excellent organization of the Stockholm+50. The Stockholm+50 international meeting, co-hosted by Sweden and Kenya, comes at a crucial time when the world faces unprecedented global environmental challenges, including the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. It presents a unique opportunity to be another turning point for addressing the global environmental challenges and steer humanity back on the path to a healthy planet and prosperity for all. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at the 1972 World Conference on Human Environment, world leaders adopted the Stockholm Declaration and Action Plan for Human Development. Environmental issues were placed at the center stage of international concern, and since then, a number of important milestones have been achieved, which include the creation of UNEP to champion environmental matters at a global level. However, 50 years later on, the world is still confronted by several environmental challenges that undermine global efforts to eradicate poverty and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the triple planetary crisis demands that concerted global efforts and leadership are shown in the way natural resources are managed and utilized now more than ever before to change the current trajectory. While we note that our individual consumption choices do make a difference, it is collective action, multilateralism, that will create the transformative environmental change we need. This is the change that will help us advance to a more unjust earth where everyone can flourish. Zambia stands ready to work with the global community in responding to the global environmental crisis. The country is actively addressing the triple planetary crisis by increasing its ambitions in its NDCs by widening sector coverage of greenhouse gas emission mitigation, committing itself to ending deforestation and forest degradation by 2030, increasing its protected forest cover to 45%, promoting nature-based solutions, circular economy, and approaches that are highly efficient, cost-effective, and nature-friendly. As chair of the African Group of Negotiators, our message to the world is that we need to make good on our Glasgow commitments to double adaptation finance and make it easier and faster for developing countries in Africa to obtain and not shroud it in complexities and technicalities. As the countries mainly responsible for climate change, we call upon the developed world to provide more financing to enable the developing world to construct climate-resilient infrastructure, transition to renewable energy, and hence develop their economies with benefits to their people in a holistic, transformative, and inclusive manner. We must accelerate interventions, combine our efforts and initiatives in responding to the challenges. The trust and confidence we have shown so far must result into tangible results which should be realized and can be showcased at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. As I conclude, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I invite you all to invest in Zambia's mining sector, which together with the DRC Congo has the largest quantity of minerals for...
I thank the Minister of Green Economy and Environment of Zambia for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Vaughan Peterson Miller, Minister of the Environment and Natural Resources of the Bahamas. Please, Mr. Minister.
Presidents of the Stockholm+50 Conference, executives of UNEP, UN Secretariats, Your Excellencies, and distinguished delegates. The fight against our planetary triple threat is non-conventional. Winning will therefore require non-conventional interventions. Pragmatic but sweeping, less talk and more action. Aldo Leopold wrote, and I quote, "We abuse land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect." The world is aware of the indisputable fact that small island states carry grave vulnerabilities. Vulnerability to loss and damage from extreme climatic events, vulnerability to loss in biodiversity, vulnerability to loss of traditions and cultures, and vulnerability to harmful chemicals. We know, for example, that small island states like the Bahamas have minuscule carbon footprints, yet are affected the most by the deleterious consequences of climate change. A perpetual rise in sea level, more intense storms, increased flooding, and powerful sea surges and ocean acidification continues to ravage island nations. To meet the demands of the triple threats, we have introduced landmark legislation on environmental planning and protection, banned single-use plastics like plastic bags, food utensils, and styrofoam containers, more than doubled our marine protected areas, more than quadrupled our protected tree species list, and reviewed and reaffirmed our commitment to pivotal environmental instruments, namely the Convention on Biological Diversity and the UNFCCC. We note with a sober reality the comments of the host Prime Minister. I quote, "If we do not address the issue of marine pollution, we will soon have plastics more than fish in our oceans," end quote. It is our hope that our young people will realize that as it was once our duty, it will someday be their duty to continue to provide leadership and encourage partnerships in caring for the environment, enabling people to improve their quality of life without compromising that of future generations. In closing, as the Bahamas was given the extraordinary privilege of hosting the first conference of the parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity in 1994, now today, we are honored to be celebrating with you 50 years of the UN Convention on the Human Environment in the very city where it all began. The Bahamas will demonstrate measurable contributions and meaningful actions as we beckon the world to do the same. I thank you.
I thank the Minister of the Environment and Natural Resources of the Bahamas for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Aram Meimarian, Deputy Minister of Environment of Armenia. Mr. Deputy Minister, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start by thanking the United Nations for the effort put in place to convene this meeting. I thank the government of Sweden and the government of Kenya for hosting this event. Armenia is a mountainous country with an ambitious environmental agenda, which makes significant efforts towards a low-carbon development through increasing the share of renewable energy, promoting energy efficiency, preserving and enhancing forest-covered areas. The Sustainable Development Goals are integrated, and we do recognize that the action in one area will affect outcomes in others, and the development must balance social, economic, and environmental sustainability. Despite the challenges by the COVID-19 pandemic and Nagorno-Karabakh war in 2020, Armenia is committed to a stronger integration into the global environmental agenda and to demonstrating an increase in our climate ambition. The vision of the government of Armenia towards green transition and climate resilience rests on the principles of green, resilient, and low-carbon growth, which entails scalability of adaptation and bankability of mitigation efforts, ranging from reforestation at scale to investments in renewable energy and energy efficiency. As highlighted in the Energy Sector Development Strategy Program to 2040, the target of the government of Armenia is to reach 15% of solar energy share in total energy production by 2030, and the share of zero-emission power generation in total will reach 54%. Faced with the challenges of meeting a growing demand for electricity in a sustainable, reliable, and affordable manner, and recognizing Armenia's good solar potential, the government of Armenia initiated several solar energy projects as a way to introduce a cost-effective renewable energy source in the country in line with its strategy to foster low-carbon generation and development of renewables as part of its climate commitments. The climate change tells us with abundant clarity that we need to mitigate and make adaptive efforts, and we need to act. In this regard, industry for clean and circular economy, afforestation and reforestation policies are just a few examples of how Armenia addresses worldwide environmental challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, given the worldwide environmental challenges and the irreversible impact on climate and the pivotal role of nature conservation as a means to ensure social, economic, and environmentally sustainable development. Once again, I wish to reiterate our readiness to cooperate with all member states, UN agencies, and international organizations, multi-stakeholder groups, and the private sector in advancing the global environmental agenda. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the Deputy Minister of Environment of Armenia for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Nazullo Oblomuradov, Chairman of the State Committee for Ecology and Environment Protection of Uzbekistan. You have the floor.
Thank you, Vice President, Excellencies, dear heads of delegations, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Republic of Uzbekistan, let me to extend greetings to distinguished delegates, member parties, and to all participants of Stockholm+50 and the occasion of UNEP's 50th anniversary. This date is also significant by the start of UN Decade of Action to Deliver Global Goals, UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration, recent adoption of UN Environment Assembly resolution to end plastic pollution. Urgency and complexity of today's environmental challenges in combination with COVID-19 pandemic impact have clearly demonstrated the importance of maintaining regular dialogue and cooperation, getting back on track to achieve sustainable development goals and addressing nature-climate crisis requires uniting efforts, going beyond focusing on individual problems, finding integrated and modern green solutions. We can and must to ensure human development in harmony with the nature. Uzbekistan has suffered severely from Aral Sea crisis, which has caused dramatic impact on biodiversity loss, land degradation, air pollution, and created a number of environmental challenges. Once fourth biggest lake in the world, Aral Sea has lost nearly 90% of water body and became known as one of the world's biggest man-made environmental disasters. In 2017, under the initiative of the President Mirziyoyev, a massive afforestation campaign was launched, and as of today, almost 2 million hectares of dried Aral seabed have been planted. In 2018, UN multi-partner Human Security Trust Fund for the Aral Sea region was established. The multi-partnership trust fund became a reliable and unified platform for the government of Uzbekistan, United Nations, international donors, and the business community, consolidated and expanded its work towards a people-centered response to mitigating disastrous consequences of Aral Sea crisis. Their Excellencies, participants, in addition to promotion of afforestation in Aral Sea region, in autumn 2021, government of Uzbekistan has launched Green Environment Yashil Makon initiative with annual 200 million trees planting target in the next 5 years. A key target of this initiative is to increase coverage of green areas in cities up to 30% by 2030. We aim to ensure our socio-economic development in harmony with nature. Dear colleagues, allow me to inform you that positive and dynamic reforms are the reality of today's Uzbekistan. In this very moment, government of Uzbekistan sets environmental agenda into top priority. In the last 5 years, total area of protected natural areas have been increased from 4% to 13% of the country's area. Uzbekistan has set ambitious targets to double energy efficiency of the economy by 2030. By 2025, we plan to launch solar and wind power plants with total capacity of 2,900 megawatts, and with that to increase the share of renewable energy to 25%. Later this year, we plan to host International Green Energy Forum in Aral Sea region. On behalf of the Republic of Uzbekistan, let me express our readiness and commitment. We look forward.
I thank the Chairman of the State Committee for Ecology and Environment Protection of Uzbekistan for his statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Nino Tandilashvili, Deputy Minister of Environmental Protection and Agriculture of Georgia. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor and pleasure for me to be present here today in the beautiful city of Stockholm and having the opportunity to address such an important international meeting as Stockholm+50 on behalf of Georgia. We all understand the significance of the United Nations Conference on Human Environment held in 1972, the 5th anniversary of which we celebrate today. With the adoption of the Stockholm Declaration and creation of United Nations Environment Programme, the Conference on the Human Environment was a milestone in introducing a human rights-based approach to environmental protection. 50 years ago, the global community took the commitment to ensure sustainable development and intergenerational equity. We have seen fundamental developments and improvements in the field of environmental protection on international and national levels since 1972 conference. I'm glad to say that environmental protection became our common goal and one of the top priorities worldwide. It should be highlighted that similarly, it is high on the agenda of the government of Georgia, a small country in the Caucasus region, which is rich with wonderful landscapes, natural forests, water resources, biodiversity, and rare wetlands, which is acknowledged as natural heritage by UNESCO. Unfortunately, even in the 21st century, we are still facing major challenges such as climate change, biodiversity loss, deforestation, pollution, unsustainable consumption of natural resources. Recent events such as the pandemic and ongoing war in Ukraine disrupts peace and stability and poses a new threat to global food security. I would like to use this opportunity to express our full solidarity at all levels and the political support to Ukraine and Ukrainian people. Despite the above challenges, the government of Georgia stays fully committed to its international obligations and undertakings in the field of environmental protection and climate change. We have already taken significant steps to fulfill our international commitments as well as obligations under the EU-Georgia Association Agreement in the field of ambient air protection, water resources management, sustainable management of forests, protection of biodiversity, and expansion of protected areas. Georgia has made a historic step by applying for membership of the European Union. We have expectations that you can make a positive decision on Georgia's candidate membership to the European Union. At the same time, we do understand the responsibility it shall bring to our country. Thereby, we stay fully committed to continue even more intensive work to ensure environmental democracy, strengthen environmental governance, and help the transition to green economy, among others by introducing circularity principles in Georgia. I'm confident that Stockholm+50 meeting will play an essential role in identifying further plans of action to improve environmental protection, overcome existing difficulties, as well as in strengthening international cooperation. Furthermore, I would like to highlight the importance of the national consultations in this process and use this opportunity to thank to the government of Sweden for their support as we prepared a national report about the existing progress and future steps that has to be taken after this conference and recommendations as well, with the involvement of the civil society organizations and all stakeholders. And we do understand that this is a very important process to ensure that public has right to participate in the decision-making process, that all the voices can be heard. I thank you very much for your attention.
I thank the Deputy Minister of Environmental Protection and Agriculture of Georgia for her statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Zulfiya Suleymanova, Vice Minister of Ecology, Geology and Natural Resources of Kazakhstan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to address such a distinguished audience on behalf of the Republic of Kazakhstan and be part of this memorial event. Let me thank the government of Sweden for hosting and organizing this platform for us to gather and sync up on the actions. It is said that the longest journey begins with a single step. 50 years ago, The Stockholm Conference was that first step that recognized the indivisibility between human well-being and environment. We have walked a long journey since then, but environmental issues, including the looming climate crisis, remain high on the agenda. We need to accelerate our actions and not only commit, but also deliver on the environmental mandate. Kazakhstan is a party to 27 multilateral environmental instruments and their protocols, and is firmly committed to positively contributing to environmental action. Kazakhstan was among the first countries to adopt a strategic document aimed at transition to a green economy, with the respective national concept being adopted in 2030. Greening of the economy is one of the national priorities, and we plan to galvanize our actions in that direction. Kazakhstan is a landlocked country, and for us, it is difficult not to speak about the devastating effects of climate change that we are already experiencing. The temperature in our country has already increased by 2 degrees in the last 100 years. So being an active supporter of climate action is natural for us. With strong political will behind, we have pledged to reaching climate neutrality by 2060. Currently, we are developing the strategy on climate neutrality that should lay the course that would aid us in our endeavor. Kazakhstan is a carbon-intensive developing economy, but we have strong will and firm commitment. Last year, we have adopted a new environmental code where we have codified novel approaches to accelerating the environmental action. We have introduced the concept of carbon budget, included climate action adaptation measures, instructed the introduction of best available techniques, and many more. Of course, we're not at our green destination, but rather in a journey towards a greener future. Last but not the least, I would like to separately note the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the adoption of which we received with great inspiration. We have already integrated 80% of SDGs in our strategic government programs, and this year we shall present a second voluntary national review report. The last 2 days, we have been talking about strengthening our collective efforts in delivering on the climate and environmental mandate. We believe that this is possible with stronger partnership and closer cooperation. Thank you very much.
I thank the Vice Minister of Ecology, Geology and the Natural Resources of Kazakhstan for her statement. And I now give the floor to Her Excellency Anniko Reis, State Secretary of the Ministry of Technology and Industry of Hungary. Madam State Secretary, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Half a century after the 1972 Stockholm Conference, Hungary is proud to be an active part of one of the most important projects of mankind, that is to maintain our globe for the future generations. Hungary truly believes that cooperation and understanding will help us achieve our goal if all stakeholders are aware of the environmental and social consequences of their decisions. Hungary is confident that mutual respect and goodwill shall guide us all in situations of need or cases of environmental distress. Hungary also believes that together we'll find answers to our most pressing common matters, while effective local solutions are equally respected. Hungary lays special emphasis on harmonizing the protection of our planet, the created world, with a constant economic growth, security, and well-being of its people. The Hungarian constitution, called fundamental law, provides the framework of our society. It clearly declares that there is an alliance of past, present, and future generations of Hungarians. It contains a wide range of references to environmental matters, from the protection of waters to a GMO-free agriculture, and prescribes financial sustainability in order to protect our children's future. We have an environmental legislation, an active constitutional court, and an ombudsman responsible for environmental matters. Actions and facts define the best the efforts by Hungary. Allow me to mention some of them. Hungary is one of the few countries which decreased greenhouse gas emissions while maintaining and even accelerating economic growth during the past years. Hungary is among the first countries prohibiting single-use plastics. The overall state financing of national parks in Hungary was increased by 4 times during the last 10 years. Currently, Hungary spends over 1.3% of the GDP on environmental goals. Since 1972, the Stockholm Conference, Hungary made a 30% and partly afforestation, and in the recent years, with a clear link to the future generation, we introduced a new project, planting 10 trees for each newborn in Hungary. Education of the youth and the youngest is crucial. We start this in kindergartens with a clear understanding that our children are the strongest bonds and assets in our efforts to save our planet. Thank you very much for your distinguished attention. Thank you.
I thank the State Secretary of the Ministry of Technology and Industry of Hungary for her statement. And I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ilaria Fontana, Under-Secretary of State of the Ministry of Ecological Transition of Italy.
Good morning. Thank you for giving me the floor. Excellencies, colleagues, distinguished delegates, Italy aligns itself with the statement delivered by the European Union. I am extremely pleased to attend this international meeting today. On behalf of the Italian government, I wish to express my gratitude to the host city of Stockholm and to the governments of Sweden and Kenya for organizing the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of an event of historical significance, which at that time was possible thanks to the visionary and far-sighted approach of extraordinary people. Today, we are at a crossroads. To accomplish the common objectives enshrined in the Agenda 21, in the 2030 Agenda, the Paris Agreement to limit global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius, or to embark upon a path of decline, full of countless risks and unknown roads never traveled by humanity until now. Borrowing the title of a recent UNEP report, our task is simple to tell. We need to make peace with nature. But this is a complex task. It will not happen overnight. Italy believes that the first critical pillar of this pathway is a radical transformation of the linear growth model through the adoption of a circular economy model that empowers all stakeholders, including the private sector and the civil society. Italy has used this same approach in drafting the first national strategy for the circular economy, which has been included among the reforms to support the investments of Mission 2 in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan in the context of the Next Generation EU funds. Furthermore, the Italian government has adopted policies to overcome the linear economy model and curb an exponential growth of the emissions. In addition to the measures adopted to stimulate the production of electricity from renewable energy sources and to improve efficiency in the use of energy, other measures and initiatives have been adopted in the field of resource efficiency, waste management and plastic pollution, which are key priorities for the Italian government and guided the G20 presidency of Italy in 2021. The second pillar in this pathway is a stronger link between scientific assessments and political decisions. To bridge the gap between science and policy in environmental decision-making is an essential prerequisite for addressing Italy's complex global environmental challenges. In this field, important results have been pursued at the national level, in particular through the annual publication of a catalogue of environmentally harmful and environmentally friendly subsidies, in compliance with recommendations of the European Parliament, the European Council and the OECD. Furthermore, Italy publishes on an annual basis a report on the state of natural capital in order to promote the measurement of the physical and economic dimensions of stocks and flows of natural capital, according to the methodologies defined by the United Nations and the European Union. Madam Co-Chair, in conclusion, we have not reached Stockholm only for a commemorative event. In these 2 days, we are drawing a picture where everybody can contribute to the well-being of future generations in a way that is fully sustainable from an environmental, economic and social point of view, and it is fair, inclusive and above all, peaceful for all. Thank you.
I thank the Undersecretary of State of the Ministry of Ecological Transition of Italy for her statement, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Freddy Mamani, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of the plurinational state of Bolivia.
Muchísimas gracias, señora.
Thank you so much, Madam President. 50 years since the International Conference on Human Environment in Stockholm, we note that only a minority of this world is able to live well, since our systems of living with Pachamama, Mother Nature, have been destroyed. From our perspective, the structural system is the capitalist system, and the solution must come through destroying it. And therefore, we must make sure that we change our systems and look and have a paradigm shift so that we're in line with Mother Nature. The corrective action must be taken to restore harmony with Mother Earth and not to destroy nature. We must make sure that we care for the natural legacy we've been given, and the financial, ecological resources must be at the service of a recovery of balance with nature and not productivity in the capitalist system. 50 years since we took up this challenge multilaterally, we're completely and entirely in agreement that climate change is a reality and we must act. It's time that each of us, we work together on this multilateral commitment to save the planet. Bolivia is making great efforts to keep up with its national commitments. We have increased clean energy production and we have reduced deforestation, amongst other important progress. But we must mention that, in line with many other developing countries, we require mechanisms that are more favorable in terms of financing, and we require access to technology so that we can make this transition. It's more difficult for developing countries to do this than for developed countries. I would also like to share with you that in the preparation for our participation of this high-level event, we were debating with our indigenous natives and with the farmers, and we have a detailed proposal for which can go towards a general debate for structural changes that need to be made, and we would like to share these with this international meeting, as well as rights from Mother Earth. Bolivia would like to reiterate its commitment to continue working with all of you to initiate the decisive way forward to live well in balance with Pachamama, Mother Earth, and Stockholm+50. We are totally in agreement with its theme, a healthy planet for the prosperity of all, our responsibility, our opportunity. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of the plurinational state of Bolivia for his statement, and I now give the floor to Her Excellency Marta Delgado Peralta, Undersecretary for Multilateral Affairs and Human Rights of the Secretary of Foreign Affairs of Mexico.
Thank you, Madam President. Buenos días. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much to the government of Sweden and the government of Kenya for bringing us together on this very important occasion. Esteemed colleagues, representatives of civil society, of all social sectors, it's a great honor for me to share with you this deliberation on the environmental agenda as we have come to 50 years, and to construct, through multilateralism, common solutions for the conservation of biodiversity, to combat climate change, and to combat desertification and soil degradation. As nations, we have recognized the indivisible link between nature and human development, committing ourselves to the Sustainable Development Goals to ensure full respect of the environment for all persons without leaving anyone behind. This year, we have the opportunity to strengthen our environmental regime at international level on various fronts. One is to make progress in terms of the negotiations for a global treaty that's legally binding on plastic pollution. Two, recognize the Convention of the United Nations to combat desertification as a central part of the solution to deal with the climate change of loss of biodiversity and soil degradation, as well as food scarcity. Three, a global framework on biodiversity post-2020 that should be as ambitious as it is required. And four, to make progress in the implementation of the Paris Agreement. However, it is clear to us that this is not sufficient. The undertakings that we have adopted require actions and strong political will in order to transform the model of accumulation and inequality which produce such unsustainable patterns that they have caused all of this. We need to move towards a circular economy. For this, we require the participation of everyone. For that reason, with the support of UNDP and the government of Sweden, UNEP, for Stockholm+50, we organized a series of public consultations, and we listened over and over again to the urgency of immediate action. Our societies are yearning for action with immediate impact. Out of these consultations, we were able to understand the importance of strengthening the participative processes for decision-making on environmental issues and the free, prior and informed consent of our indigenous peoples and of our local communities. Our youth reminded us of the need to improve environmental education and to promote inequality, and to listen to the voices of women who told us of the imperative of making sure that we care for our natural resources and include the representation in an effective way of women in decision-making processes. It's important to include gender and human rights for an inclusive development in Mexico, and this must be based on social equality, otherwise it will not be sustainable. We don't have another 50 years ahead of us, and I urge all of us to take up this opportunity provided to us by Stockholm+50. I thank you for your attention.
I now give the floor to His Excellency Rauf Haji.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me express my appreciation to the Secretariat of the United Nations General Assembly for organizing this important event. I would like to also thank the host country, Sweden, for excellent hospitality, and government of Kenya for overall support. It's obvious that environment plays important role in our lives and in social, economic, and environmental sustainable development. However, this reality sometimes takes a back seat or completely forgotten. All countries and societies must take immediate actions to prevent the situation from becoming irreversible. Azerbaijan is an active participant of various international environmental initiatives and a party to vast number of multilateral environmental agreements. Clean environment and green growth is the priority directions for the next decade set by the strategic document Azerbaijan 2030 National Priorities for Socio-Economic Development. More than 10% of country's territory are covered by specially protected nature areas. Most of them are globally important. Azerbaijan has joined the Bonn Challenge with the commitment of bringing 270,000 hectares of forest land into restoration. Our country has submitted an ambitious commitment in its first NDC targeting 35% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. We have set new target to reduce emissions up to 40% until 2050. The 3 decades-long Armenian occupation inflicted massive degradation of the unique ecosystem of not only Azerbaijan, but the whole region and beyond has irrevocably damaged. As a result of the liberation of our territories in full accordance with the Charter of the United Nations and international law, Azerbaijan has launched the large-scale reconstruction and rehabilitation, including environmental recovery activities in collaboration with our international partners. Our target is to create net zero emission zone by 2050, as well as the green energy zones in the liberated territories. Therefore, we call upon the international community to be actively engaged in this environmental recovery process. I would like to express our sincere gratitude to UNEP for scoping mission to the liberated territories of Azerbaijan to review the environmental dimensions of recovery and identify priority areas for action. Reconstruction and bringing back to life of this territory is one of the top priorities of our country. Dear friends, I would like to take this opportunity and congratulate UNEP on the occasion of 50th anniversary of its establishment. It's obvious that the environment accepts no boundaries, and only consolidated actions at international and regional level could bring positive results. That's UNEP's valuable role in encouraging environmental partnership between nations is outstanding. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the Deputy Minister for his statement, and I'll give the floor to His Excellency Mehmet Emin Birpena, Deputy Minister of Environment, Urbanization and Climate Change of Turkey.
Excellencies, distinguished ministers, and ladies and gentlemen, Stockholm Conference promoted multilateral environmental cooperation for the last 50 years. So we see Stockholm+50 Conference as an opportunity to boost urgent action for our planet and combat climate change for the next 50 years. 50 years ago, this sustainability discussion started with the conventions of climate, desertification, and biodiversity. Today, sustainability still remains the overarching goal. The climate action turned to be the measure implementation tool for all environmental concerns. Concrete steps taken to combat environmental challenges and the climate change is significant for our world more than ever. As you are aware, we have become a party to the Paris Agreement. Immediately afterwards, our President, His Excellency Recep Tayyip Erdogan, announced our 2050 net zero emission target and green development vision. We are preparing the climate law that will support the climate action and set up a carbon pricing mechanism in Turkey. We are updating national determined contribution and climate change strategy action plan with the target of 2053. We also have begun to prepare the long-term strategy in line with our country's 2053 zero target. Plastic pollution is also on our focus. Thanks to the Zero Waste project under the auspices of our First Lady, Madam Emine Erdogan, recycling rate has been increased from 13% to 27% from 2017 to 2020, and estimated to reach 35% in 2023. So we have started charging plastic bags in 2019, and the use of plastic bags in Turkey decreased by 65% in 3 years' time. We have initiated the preparation of the National Circular Economy Action Plan, and we will focus on restriction of single-use plastics. Marine litter threatens our world. All we know, it's an ever growing environmental and health problem despite all the measures taken. We took important steps to prevent marine litter at its source with the national legislation we put into practice in 2019. In my capacity as the head of the Bureau of Barcelona Convention, we are ready to take urgent action for plastic-free seas and stronger regional cooperation. Hereby, I would like to note that we are happy for the plastic decision taken in UNEA 5.3. After the Basel, Stockholm and Rotterdam Conventions are going to become a party of Minamata Convention also. So we are expecting the Stockholm+50 conference will be strengthening the action for the triple planetary crisis. It will encourage governments, international organizations, business and industry, civil society organizations to exchange ideas on opportunity to achieve a sustainable development goal. We hope that Stockholm+50 will offer opportunities to build lasting coalitions for the environment, will foster strong partnership. Turkey is ready to contribute to these efforts. Thank you very much.
I thank the Deputy Minister for his statement, and I'll give the floor to Her Excellency Sharon Ikiaza, Minister of State for Environment of Nigeria.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to address you today on behalf of the government of Nigeria. And we congratulate and thank the United Nations, the government of Sweden, and Kenya for convening this conference. I'll start by saying Nigeria aligns itself with the statement delivered by Morocco on behalf of the African group. 50 years after the Stockholm Conference, environmental challenges have increased from climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, deforestation, and so on. Nigeria is facing several environmental challenges from desertification and the adverse impacts of climate change, as seen in the shrinkage of the Lake Chad in the north to the flooding and coastal erosions in the south. Nigeria recognizes the need to conserve her biodiversity resources because all these environmental degradations are adversely affecting the lives and livelihoods of our people. Our efforts to fight against deforestation, land degradation, and biodiversity loss has culminated into the designation of 3 additional UNESCO biosphere reserves within the country, resulting in the protection and conservation of over 1.8 million hectares of forest area in our country. We have also gazetted 10 new national parks to increase the number of protected areas within the country to 17 national parks, including 32 game reserves and sanctuaries, and we are implementing the Great Green Wall initiative. Consequently, Nigeria has institutionalized proactive frameworks and strategic policies to safeguard our biodiversity resources for sustainable management. But most importantly, of recent, the enactment of the Climate Change Act by President Muhammadu Buhari, and this act provides for carbon budgeting. In conclusion, ensuring a healthy planet is important to delivering the SDGs. It is therefore the shared responsibility of all to come together in rescuing the world's remaining biodiversity resources and save our planet from imminent danger. This is a necessity for us to build a shared future for all. Our focus, therefore, should be in protecting and conserving the intrinsic ecosystems. Nigeria calls for bold funding commitments to bridge the nature finance gap to halt and reverse deforestation and loss of biodiversity while ensuring the fair and equitable sharing of its benefits in order to achieve a healthy planet for all. As we transition to a net zero world, we must therefore also build a nature-positive economy, for if nature prospers, our people will prosper. I thank you for your kind attention.
I thank the Minister of State for Environment of Nigeria for her statement. And I now give the floor to His Excellency Javier Gutierrez Ramirez, Secretary for Climate Change of the Presidency and Vice Minister of Environment and Natural Resources of Nicaragua.
Good morning, everyone. We are extremely happy to convey the fraternal greetings of the President of the Republic of Nicaragua, Commandant Daniel Ortega Saavedra, and the Vice President, Comrade Rosario Murillo, to all of the peoples and governments in this important meeting. 50 years ago, here in this beautiful city of Stockholm, the first Earth Summit was held, and the conservation principles and an action plan for human development were adopted. 20 years later, in 1992, the Rio Summit was held with 172 member states, laying the foundations for sustainability through 3 major conventions: climate change, combating desertification, and biodiversity. After half a century of the development agenda and its mechanisms, more than celebrating, we must reflect and act, answering the following questions. Have we overcome environmental and social problems? Have we been fair and equitable with financing for the countries that are most sensitive to the impacts of environmental degradation? Or have we increased the gap between rich and poor? Have we reached a point of no return in environmental degradation and climate change? The answer is alarming. Our Mother Earth is dying. Environmental pollution and the effects of climate change prevent sustainable development for our peoples. They are an obstacle to ending poverty and putting food security at risk. We cite some problems. Natural forests are disappearing. Global temperature increases of 1.1 degrees Celsius due to emissions and concentrations of carbon dioxide, 59 billion tons and 420 parts per million respectively. The foregoing as a result of the fact that the Earth is overwhelmed by unprecedented pollution due to the application of inhuman models of production and consumption by large economies. If we continue to fail to resolve and respond this, we must reflect and act yesterday according to the principles of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capacities. This environmental and climate crisis is a global threat with local impact. It requires a response from the highest political level, especially from those who cause the problem. It is necessary to transform the development model. It's urgent that the countries of the world adopt a model of civilization that defends Mother Earth, which implies a cosmocentric world where nature and human beings are a totality, the totality of Mother Earth, replacing the anthropocentric model in which nature is at the service of humans. Mr. President, Madam President, Nicaragua believes firmly in multilateralism to address the climate crisis, the environmental crisis, the crisis of values and principles of solidarity is the only way to provide well-being for all in harmony with Mother Earth. Nicaragua reaffirms the commitment to work for a collaborative environmental and climate agenda for respectful, progressive cooperation in line with the principles of Christianity, socialism, and solidarity, where the people, the family, and the community are the protagonists. Thank you very much to all.
I thank the Secretary for his statement, and I now give the floor to His Presidency, Puvong Luangsaisana, Vice Minister of Natural Resources and Environment of the Laos People's Democratic Republic. Please.
Thank you, Madam President. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me today to represent the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment of the Lao People's Democratic Republic to be among you at this international meeting today. Having followed the sustainable development path, Lao PDR has set its national development strategies in green direction, aiming at improving equality, reducing the vulnerability of poor communities through sustainable interventions and enhanced coordination with development partners. Having recognized the Earth planetary crisis, the government has been working towards an integrated approach by applying ecosystem-based adaptation measures. The government is taking action and focusing on implementation of the Paris Agreement. The nationally determined contribution has been mainstreamed into our national socio-economic development plan and national green growth strategy. Lapidia is one of the 10 most important global biodiversity ecoregions and home to some of the world's biologically richest and most endangered species. However, we have also experienced loss in wildlife and endangered species due to the land use change and habitat destruction. Thus, we target to increase the forest cover by 70% of our territory by 2025. Like other poor countries, we have inadequate technical and financial resources to address the problems of 3 planetary crises. We believe that increased financial support and flow to least developed and developing countries is critical for achieving our goals under the Stockholm+50. And we look forward to continued support from the international community, international climate funds, development partners, as well as investments from the private sector. LAPDR will continue to work closely with the international communities and relevant stakeholders to ensure steady progress towards the SDGs, achieving LDC graduation, and improving the well-being of all citizens. Finally, I wish everyone a great success at this international meeting. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the Vice Minister for his statement and will now make an announcement. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, in view of the number of speakers remaining on the list of speakers, we will continue the current meeting into the lunch break until 2 p.m. today. Representatives of states, intergovernmental organizations, and the United Nations system that are ready to speak are requested to approach the list of speakers table located to my left. I now give the floor to Ms. Vicky Robertson, Secretary for the Environment of New Zealand.
Ngā mihi nui ki kai karanga tēnā koe. Presidents, Excellencies, Executive Director and friends, I would like to begin by acknowledging our hosts, Sweden and Kenya. Aotearoa New Zealand was honoured to be among the original 112 countries who gathered here in Stockholm in 1972 for the UN Conference on the Human Environment. 50 years ago, we made a commitment for global environmental action. It is that commitment that we are honoured to bring here again today. Like so many others, we are horrified by the rapidly evolving catastrophe in Ukraine. We reiterate our call for an immediate end to Russian aggression. Colleagues, this occasion of Stockholm+50 brings to mind the Māori proverb, kia whakatōmuri te haere whakamua. Now, this saying describes, in the indigenous language of Aotearoa New Zealand, the action of walking backwards into the future with one's eyes fixed on the past. We must take heed of these words as we reflect on the legacy of the 1972 conference and look to overcome today's challenges. The triple planetary crisis of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss cast a long shadow on our future. Solutions can seem impossible. But if we look to the first steps we took here in Stockholm 50 years ago, and to the many international efforts since, we have shown that we can agree collectively on a way forward. We came together in the Montreal Protocol to halt the loss of the ozone layer. In 1992, we adopted 3 conventions on biodiversity, climate change, and desertification. In 2015, we agreed on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, including the SDGs, and we also agreed to globally take action to address climate change. Today, global environmental efforts continue, driven by the spirit of the Stockholm Conference. Negotiations are underway for a treaty to protect biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction and to develop a global biodiversity framework. Both are outcomes that must be ambitious and commensurate with the challenges that we face globally, and we need to commit to implementation. The international community is embarking on negotiations for a new treaty to end plastic pollution. In New Zealand, our 2019 ban on plastic bags has meant over 1 billion fewer plastic bags have ended up in landfills. Our region's future depends on international cooperation on climate change that results in genuine emissions reduction. At home, we have just released our first national emissions reduction plan and will shortly release our first national adaptation plan, key milestones in our response to the climate crisis. These plans will involve transformational change for our communities and institutions for intergenerational benefit. We must acknowledge, listen to, and learn from voices that are too often ignored. We take heart from the emphasis placed here on the voice and representation of young people and the direction to place future generations at the heart of all discussions. Indigenous worldviews offer new ways of considering and engaging with our environment. The Māori approach to the environment is based on kaitiakitanga, guardianship and protection. Recognising the value of this idea and ideas like it from around the world is an important step in addressing our common challenges. Aotearoa New Zealand is committed to playing our part for future generations, from our efforts to combat plastic waste and climate change to ensuring that the problems of pollution are not passed down from generation to generation. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary for Environment of New Zealand for his statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Monica Medina, Assistant Secretary of Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs of the United States of America.
On behalf of the United States, I thank our gracious hosts and co-presidents, Sweden and Kenya. We gather in Stockholm in the shadow of the evil still unfolding in Ukraine and inspired by the steadfast courage and resolve of the Ukrainian people. We will remain united in our defense of peace, of freedom, of democracy, of sovereignty, and of international law. Today we celebrate the 1972 UN Conference on the Human Environment. But I ask you, what if that meeting had never taken place? What if? What would our world look like today if the leaders in 1972 had not created UNEP, had not galvanized a movement to save the planet? What happened here 50 years ago was revolutionary, unprecedented, visionary. It was hard. It broke through all the pressure to develop, extract, and exploit the natural world. We must remember what happened, and yet here we are again at a crossroads. One road leads to more of the same, more pollution, rising temperatures, and greater loss of biodiversity. The other road leads to a better future, where we live sustainably with nature. If we continue to live as we do now, what will we leave future generations? We cannot leave them a world drowning in plastic. We can choose a different path if together we develop a global agreement that takes an ambitious, innovative, and country-driven approach to address the full life cycle of plastic. We cannot leave them a world with barren oceans. We can choose a different path if together we develop a global agreement to protect new areas of the ocean beyond national jurisdiction, to address illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing, and to end harmful fishing subsidies. We cannot leave them a world devoid of nature and biodiversity. We can choose a different path if together at the COP for biodiversity later this year, we adopt a global goal of conserving 30% of the planet by 2030. The United States has pledged to conserve at least 30% of our domestic lands and waters by 2030, and our ocean space as well, and we encourage other countries to do the same. We cannot leave future generations a world that is too warm to sustain life as we know it either. We are not moving fast enough to hold the rise in global temperature to within that 1.5 degree limit. But we have the future in our grasp. With the Paris Agreement, the solutions are there. Clean energy, more biodiversity to hold on to carbon, and support for women and youth and marginalized communities that have been hardest hit. So as we think about all the what-ifs, what if we hadn't made the progress of the last 50 years? I ask you, what if we don't meet this moment? We know more than they did then about the consequences future generations will face if we don't act now. And keep working to save the only home we have. Let's be inspired by those who came before us. Let's work together. Let's build a future that we can give to our future, our grandchildren and our children. They're counting on us, and we cannot let them down. Thank you very much.
I thank the Assistant Secretary for her statement, and I now give the floor to Her Excellency Beatrice Atim, and you are Minister of State for Environment of Uganda.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Excellencies, distinguished friends, I would like to thank Sweden and Kenya for co-hosting this very important conference. And I bring you greetings from His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Uganda, General Yoweri Museveni, Kaguta. Your Excellency, Uganda associates itself with Pakistan on behalf of the G77 plus, China, and Niger on behalf of the African group. Uganda is encouraged by this tireless effort and confident that the decade of acceleration is being steered in an open, transparent, and highly inclusive manner to achieve the much-needed ambition we desperately require for the healthy plenary for all. Your Excellencies and friends, Uganda comes to this conference of meetings of Stockholm+50 filled with a lot of momentum and the spirit we have held since 1972 conference, when the global world deemed it fit to advance and the environmental and climate change issues for the benefit of all of us. The challenges of accelerating is critical to strengthen multilateralism and tackling the Earth's plenary. And the following is in consideration: climate change, biodiversity loss, environmental degradation, and pollution. Uganda commits itself to the 10 years restoration program to accelerate and to build resilience while at the same time allowing economic development to continue. This is demonstrated in part to the following. One, we would like to take advantage of our nature-based solution. We aim to demarcate and open up boundaries of at least 6,400 kilometers of the 65 central forest reserves boundary, and we intend to open up 7,000 kilometers of the wetland, river banks, and the lake shore boundaries. We want to restore, rehabilitate, and maintain the 54,000 hectares of degraded section of wetland, rivers, and banks, and reforestation of 78,000 hectares in the 65 central forest reserves. Increased renewable energy generation from 729 megawatts to 3,200 megawatts by 2030. We continue to give alternative sources of livelihood to our people, like fish farming, which we see as helpful rather than allowing them to degrade and deplete the forest. We recognize that the action alone, we cannot go far without your support. And therefore, we are here to ask for your support to endeavor to save tomorrow's climate today. Uganda is therefore looks forward to seeing a balanced outcome of the issues in the draft decision and conclusion in Stockholm. I would like to thank you very much.
I thank the Minister for her statement. Now I'll give the floor to Mr. Ali Al-Gamadi, Chief Executive Officer of the National Center for Environmental Compliance of Saudi Arabia.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سيد الرئيس أصحاب المعالي والسعادة رؤساء الوفود والأعضاء.
In the name of God, the merciful and the compassionate, distinguished guests, may the peace of God be upon you. I should like, on behalf of the government of Saudi Arabia, to convey our gratitude to the Kingdom of Sweden, as well as to the Republic of Kenya. We wish to praise the efforts made in ensuring the hospitality which we enjoyed. We wish to congratulate the United Nations upon the achievements of these past 50 years. In Saudi Arabia, we are firmly convinced that mankind enjoys prospects for development which are significant ones. Now, this belief is reflected in the bold vision of Saudi Arabia running through to 2030, as well as a bolstering of this vision through measures taken to promote the well-being of the environment. We have stepped up our commitments in the field of the fight against pollution and the reduction of the negative impact of climate change, a loss of vegetation, and the fight against desertification. And these are the main highlights of our strategy. The government of Saudi Arabia wishes to make all of these goals concrete ones by improving the quality of services provided and by mobilizing and raising the awareness of the broader population. This to ensure that we recycle household waste. And this should limit the impact that they have on society. Saudi Arabia also attaches great importance to the various agreements and conventions which we have adhered to. We also launched a Saudi initiative, namely the Green Saudi Arabia, which has enjoyed support from the region and the world at large. And this within the framework of our efforts aimed at combating pollution and preserving the animal species as well as sea-based species. Now, the G20 had underscored the need to reverse the trend towards a deterioration and degradation of our lands, as well as focusing on a restoration of these same lands and the need to make all necessary efforts to reduce global warming. Saudi Arabia has mobilized substantial funds aimed at reducing the effects of CO2 gases by 50% by 2040. Now, numerous initiatives have been adopted to generate clean energy, to engage in recycling of CO2 and other sources of pollution. Saudi Arabia, aware as it is of the need to preserve our planet for succeeding generations, will continue these efforts, and I wish you every possible success during this meeting. Thank you.
I thank the Chief Executive Officer for his statement, and I now give the floor to Mr. Kouakou Parfait Kawadio, Director of Cabinet of the Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development of Côte d'Ivoire.
Madame et Messieurs,
Madam President, Côte d'Ivoire welcomes the holding of this important global meeting and is pleased to take part in it. We would like to thank the organizers as well as the Swedish authorities for their thoughtfulness, as well as for the support given to delegations in preparing this meeting through national consultations so as to ensure no one is left behind. The report of these consultations has been transmitted by our country to the United Nations. Madam President, we must look back historically to remember that Stockholm was the springboard for global environmental action. 50 years later, it is therefore only natural that the same place should bring us together again to relaunch this action through the various most important conventions of global action, notably the Convention on Climate Change, the Convention on Biodiversity, the BRS conventions, and the Convention to Combat Desertification and Drought. I should also like to thank the United Nations and the entire international community for their participation in COP15, which was held in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, from the 9th to the 20th of May 2022, and which led to the implementation of an ambitious, bold land restoration program called the Abidjan Legacy Program. Ladies and gentlemen, now, the main topic of Stockholm+50, a healthy planet for all, for the prosperity of all. Indeed, this theme is about the health of the planet and the prosperity of all. Statistics and events show that the Earth is not healthy. The health of the planet is about stabilizing the climate, neutralizing land degradation, and stopping the erosion of biodiversity and all forms of pollution. For this, nature-based solutions and ecosystem-based approaches are a lifeline. Anticipating land degradation could allow, amongst other things, to produce better and produce more in order to boost prosperity. This production will be accompanied by the creation of jobs for all sections of the population, especially young people and women. Ladies and gentlemen, Côte d'Ivoire, an essentially agricultural country, has taken steps in this direction with its forest rehabilitation and forest-friendly agriculture programs. Moreover, the new forestry policy set up by Côte d'Ivoire largely takes this into account by introducing the concept of agroforests, as well as the REDD+ mechanisms. Côte d'Ivoire has also reviewed its emission of CO2 gases through its new NDCs, and Côte d'Ivoire has therefore committed itself to creating a new protected area along its coastline, measuring over 500 kilometers. Ladies and gentlemen, Côte d'Ivoire would therefore like to invite the international community, as well as our development partners and civil society organizations, as well as the private sector, to mobilize on a massive scale and to spare no effort to ensure that the resources announced and to come are made available, and are made available within the framework of the Abidjan Legacy Program. I thank you.
I thank the Director for his statement, and I now give the floor to Mr. Abdullah bin Ali Al Amri, Head of the Environment Agency of Oman.
أصحاب المعالي رئيسي الاجتماع.
Excellencies, co-presidents of our meeting, ladies and gentlemen, heads of delegation participating, may the peace of God be upon you. It is a great pleasure for me to start by conveying my gratitude of our country for the efforts made by the Secretariat of the United Nations. These untiring efforts provided through these various programs aimed at making concrete rural development projects to ensure the prosperity of all peoples and the sustainability of our lands and waters. Excellencies, 5 decades have passed since 1972. A great many efforts have been made, meetings were convened, measures taken aimed at overcoming pollution and the deterioration and degradation of natural resources. Be this as it may, what was achieved, and the achievements are significant, they were not commensurate with what we had expected. Progress has been slower than the development we had cherished to see. The gap between consumption and required forms of balance and equilibrium means that the inhabitants of this planet continue to await true results. Prospects do exist for this lengthy process to become a green and sustainable one. A great many countries around the world have started to take just this path. And amongst these countries, you have the Sultanate of Oman. Oman, who has implemented a great many recycling projects aimed at the generation of renewable energy within the framework of our grain program. We wish to turn our country into a global center which would use 40% of clean energy. The Sultanate of Oman. The Sultanate of Oman, since the conference back in 1972, has set up a great many institutions responsible for the environment. We have a number of observatories to provide follow-up for the environment, and we have even created a prize, an environmental preservation prize. Now, our national parks number 25. And we have a great deal of wildlife in these reserves. We have also launched a number of projects to protect threatened species, including endangered species. And to do this, we have created 3 of the largest areas protecting sea turtles. And of course, we also have our coastline also hosts a great many species of dolphins and whales. We also have grazing lands, and all of them, unfortunately, are threatened. But all of our efforts reflect the environmental efforts which our Sultanate has made to ensure that we achieve an environmental balance, a balance and equilibrium which has been enshrined in our plan running through 2040. So all of our efforts will be made to ensure that we strike an environmental balance. By way of conclusion, we wish to restate our gratitude to Kenya and to Sweden for having been so generous and kind as to organize this very important meeting, and we wish you every possible success in your deliberations.
I thank the head of the Environment Agency of Oman for his statement, and I have another announcement. Delegations are kindly requested to deliver their statements at normal speed. This to enable the interpreters to provide an accurate and complete rendition of their statements in all 6 languages of the organization. When statements are delivered at a fast pace, the quality of the interpretation may suffer. And with that, I now give the floor to Her Excellency Katrin Schneeberger, State Secretary, Director of the Federal Office for the Environment of Switzerland. Please.
Excellences,
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I should like to start by conveying my gratitude to Sweden and Kenya for the leadership they have shown and the hospitality they have demonstrated. 50 years after the United Nations Conference on the Environment, the Human Environment of 1972, we have reconvened here in Stockholm. Unfortunately, 50 years later, we are forced to note that a great deal, in fact, almost everything remains to be done. The situation is a critical one. We are facing a triple crisis, that of climate change, the loss of biodiversity, as well as of pollution. However, solutions are possible and exist as long as the international community finally decides to act in a concerted way. Switzerland would like to highlight 4 topics. Firstly, we have capacity building in terms of global environmental governance. It is indispensable. We have to bolster the cohesiveness and synergies between the various players and stakeholders, including multilateral international environmental agreements, to bolster efforts and strengthen the effectiveness of our action. Secondly, we require strengthened multilateralism, where common objectives prevail over narrow interests. During the UNEA, which was held in March of this year, an agreement was struck to initiate the negotiation regarding an international treaty on plastic pollution and to launch a science policy panel. These developments are encouraging ones. UNEP must bolster its political role here. Thirdly, we have to look at emerging problems and threats, such as technologies of the management of solar rays, radiation. It's essential to understand this so we can determine what opportunities exist, but also what risks are there. And this would help us in creating the appropriate governance tools to avoid undesirable impacts. And finally, we need to strengthen the nexus between science and policy. The new World Environmental Situation Room, which was launched by UNEP, is a new tool possessing enormous potential. I thank you all for your kind attention.
I thank the State Secretary for her statement, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Bob Yong Kim, Deputy Minister, Climate Change and Carbon Neutral Policy Office of the Ministry of Environment of the Republic of Korea. Please.
Okay. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is my privilege to be here in Stockholm. 50 years have passed since the Stockholm Declaration, but this message still rings true, that development, poverty, and the environment are closely interconnected. This tight link between human and the environment has been revealed yet again by COVID-19. The pandemic indeed is a powerful reminder that the next pandemic could always hit us even harder unless we change our unsustainable way of life. Fortunately, the world we are living in is completely different from the one in 1972. The environment has become a mainstream issue making headlines every day, and the momentum for change is building. In retrospect, the changes we have made for the past 50 years would have been impossible without our bold action in 1972. In this light, at this Stockholm+50 meeting, we are not only commemorating the first recognition of the fundamental right to an environment of quality, but also marking a new milestone in promoting human rights to a healthy and sustainable environment. In Korea, the Article 35 of the Constitution also stipulates that its people have the right to a clean and healthy environment. This has served as the very basis of our policy actions, such as seasonal air quality management, integrated water management, and expansion of protected areas. Likewise, our concerted efforts at global level to renew commitments to promoting human rights to a healthy environment will provide a solid basis to keep up the strong momentum we have built for decades. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, if there is one difference from the past, it would be the nexus of all environmental challenges. A net zero future would be impossible without the shift to a circular economy. Nature-based solution is an essential tool for climate change mitigation. We would seek out the synergies between different sectors to unlock the potential we have. And finally, multilateralism should be the key to rebuild relationships of trust damaged by the pandemic. No one country can resolve global environmental challenges single-handedly. We should build on the progress already made by international organizations, strengthening science policy interface such as UNEP, and move ahead with our collective values of freedom, dignity, fairness, and solidarity for a better future. Korea will spare no efforts to work together with both developing and developed countries as a responsible member of the international community towards the future we want. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the Deputy Minister, Climate Change and Carbon Neutral Policy Office of the Ministry of Environment of the Republic of Korea for his statement. I now give the floor to Mr. Pam Kandel, Secretary in the Ministry of Forest and Environment of Nepal.
Thank you, Mr. President, Excellencies. At the beginning, I would like to extend our sincere gratitude to the government of Sweden and Kenya for hosting this historic event to mark the 50th anniversary of the first Human Environment Summit held in this magnificent place, Stockholm, in 1972. I aligned my statement with G77 and China. 50 years ago, heads of the state gathered to set a vision for the people and the planet and committed taking responsibility for protecting and promoting human and environment. Today, we are here to evaluate the impact of 50 years of global environmental action. After post-Stockholm period, multilateral environmental agreement and policies developed and agreed, but outcomes and impact for a healthier planet remain insufficient. Climate change has already caused widespread adverse impact to nature and people, and limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees is beyond the reach. Biodiversity and ecosystem are deteriorating worldwide. Fundamental natural resources such as air, land, water, and ecosystem have been degraded due to the pollution. Excellencies, Nepal is a Himalayan country having 10 out of 14 highest peaks of the world. That includes Mount Everest, the highest summit of the earth. It is the reservoir of fresh drinking water, custodian of mountain civilization, and living museum for biodiversity. However, mountains are most fragile and vulnerable to climate change. The temperature rise is higher than the global average as the region. Snowfall is decreasing and glaciers are melting. Due to extreme climate events, Nepal is facing climate-induced disaster in different forms and extent, causing huge losses to the economy, ecosystem, and human lives. Moreover, Nepal has raised high climate ambition to reach net zero emission by 2045 through the National Adaptation Plan. Nepal is implementing adaptation and disaster management action at all levels. Green, resilient, and inclusive development is the key path of Nepal's prosperity. With abundant water, forest, and biodiversity resources, Nepal can be the leader, sharing clean, green, and nature-based climate solutions in the region. However, to translate all those ambition and plan into action, we need huge resources. I urge the development partner to ensure adequate technical and financial support to the economically and environmentally vulnerable country like Nepal. Excellencies, we do not have the gap in policy and ambition. The knowledge and means of solving our problems are known and available, but action and implementation are lacking. We have less choice, but it is time for urgent action to fulfill our own commitment. Eventually, effective collaboration beyond the boundary is essential to tackle planetary crisis, reflecting on urgent need for action to achieve a healthy planet and prosperity of all. We have a unique opportunity to make Stockholm+50 Summit another milestone to hand over a better planet for the next generation. Nepal would like to be the part of the endeavors to preserve healthy and living planet. I thank you all. Thank you.
I thank the Ministry of Forest and Environment of Nepal for his statement. I now give the floor to Mr. Travis Sinclair, Deputy Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Environment, National Verification, Blue and Green Economy of Barbados. You have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, the 1960s was regarded as a period of struggle, division, and conflict. That period also witnessed civil activism, scientific discovery, and newfound nationhood for many states, including my own. The decade would also be regarded as that Renaissance era for global environmental activism, and as such, provided the building blocks for the 1972 Stockholm Conference. At that time, pollution was the issue of the day, and just as the need for collective action was recognized in 1972, the triple planetary crises of today dictate an unprecedented urgency of action to address them. These issues, juxtaposed against widening inequality, geopolitical conflict, and disrupted value chains, demand that the decade of action be undergirded by a new spirit of Stockholm, a spirit defined by the elements of reaffirmation, inclusion, and integration. Mr. President, it must be a reaffirmation of commitments made by the international community, including the 1992 Rio Declaration, the 1994 Barbados Declaration, Agenda 2030, and the Paris Agreement. These commitments represent our bond to people and planet, our guideposts for an ever-morphing collective consciousness, and our démarche to ensure no one is left behind. In my country, Article 4 of the 2021 Barbados Charter enshrines the right of every Barbadian to live in a healthy and balanced environment, and reaffirms the government's commitment to the protection of our land, air, and marine resources through progressive public policies, including our Coastal Zone Management Policy Framework, the Roof to Reefs Program, and our commitment to carbon neutrality by 2030. Mr. President, new models of inclusion are needed that encompass the imagination and energy of our youth, the wisdom and industry of our elderly, while providing voice to the marginalized and security to the vulnerable. In this regard, there's a need to continually build, to rethink and strengthen governance mechanisms built on multilateral and whole-of-society approaches. Barbados' social partnership, comprising government, business, and labor, remains our hallmark multi-stakeholder mechanism for ensuring inclusive and progressive policy development. Mr. President, there is need to ensure integration of actions at the global, regional, national, and local levels to drive coordination, cooperation, and coherence across the Partnership for Development and for building a resilient, clean, and greener future. The provision of the means of implementation, including the $100 billion of climate finance by the international community to support the efforts in developing countries, including small island developing states, cannot be overstated. Mr. President, we do not have the luxury of time. Now is the moment to recommit ourselves to the full implementation of the SDGs and the Paris Agreement. Let us ensure that this spirit of Stockholm moment creates a safer and more secure and prosperous future for our children. This is what our mission must be. I thank you.
I thank the Deputy Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Environment, National Verification, Blue and Green Economy of Barbados for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Guatemala on behalf of the Association of Caribbean States, also speaking in national capacity. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Excellencies, muchas gracias por...
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. It's my honor to give this statement in representation of the Association of Caribbean States, which Guatemala, in its role as President of the Council of Ministers, holds. The ACS is an association that works on strengthening and integrating the countries of the Caribbean zone to create a common economic space preserve the seas and promote sustainable development for its members. We would like to express our congratulations to the Kingdom of Sweden and the Republic of Kenya for co-hosting this international conference at Stockholm+50. It's a privilege to be here under this title of A Healthy Planet for the Prosperity of All, Our Responsibility, Our Opportunity. It's 50 years since we met in this same city in 1972 on human environment. We would also like to thank the Executive Director for the United Nations Environment Programme for the organization of this conference. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are coming together to live again this historic moment which placed the link between environment and poverty together, which later brought us to make progress in the Rio conferences in 1992 and 2012, placing the environment and its protection as a substantial element in the social and development agendas, providing as a result the adoption in 2015 of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, with an integrated vision of the three different axes: economic, social, and environmental. However, as a community, we are obliged to act with urgency under the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capacities to ensure that this interconnection includes every level and has socio-economic solutions based on ecosystems, including solutions based on nature, the importance of a healthy environment to provide opportunities for sustainable development both now and in the future. Excellencies, today we are faced by continuous new challenges, especially as we've seen during the COVID-19 pandemic. The adverse effects of climate change and its related threats, the loss of biodiversity and pollution. The Great Caribbean comes together to continue generating strategies which will allow us to build with more resilience a vision of inclusive development based on the Sustainable Development Goals. We highlight the vital importance of the Caribbean as a common asset of our peoples and the unifying role that it has played in our history and identity. We also recognize that SIDS and coastal areas of the Caribbean and the Central American Isthmus, and in particular the communities who live there, the indigenous peoples, original and Afro descendants, constitute one of the regions that's at the highest risk of the impacts of climate change, as was informed to us in the latest IPCC report. If we were to go to a higher level than 1.5 centigrade, then this would have catastrophic effects on the fragile ecosystems of the Caribbean. Given these grave realities, we situate ourselves at the vanguard of these international efforts made. We must move faster and robustly in order to increase the capacity of our states to adapt and to have resources for loss and damage, as well as promoting resilience within our communities, to empower our people to take decisions based on the environment and the planet which we are going to bequeath to future generations. Within this global effort, we call upon developed countries to assume the leadership through, one, more ambitious mitigation and adaptation commitments, which include loss and damage, two, the provision of new and additional resources and technology transfer, and three, the provision of capacities to developing countries. All this in order to be able to face up to the consequences of climate change and to confront the loss and damage caused by its effects. As a region, it's urgent that we multiply our efforts to strengthen resilience, including the elaboration of regional projects which will allow access to global financial mechanisms. I conclude by reflecting on the fact that we must be the voice of those who do not have a voice. We call upon continued collaboration in addressing related problems to generate urgent actions and changes in the long term, identifying solutions and sharing best practices to achieve sustainable development in all regions without leaving anyone behind. Mr. President, Excellencies, in representation of the state of Guatemala, I'd like to add a few more points. Guatemala is completely committed and continues to make progress in its activities to achieve a healthy planet for the prosperity of all. Despite our low contribution in terms of emissions, which is only 0.07% of GHGs globally, we are a highly vulnerable country in terms of impacts of climate change and the loss of biodiversity. The country recognizes the importance of achieving in this decade the action of the SDGs with a universal appeal to put an end to poverty and to protect the planet and to ensure that everyone is able to enjoy peace and prosperity by 2030. Under the leadership of the President of the Republic of Guatemala, Dr. Alejandro Giammattei, we have carried out a process of national consultations with different governmental institutions, the private sector and civil society, with the objective of having inclusive discussions in order to make progress in a more robust fashion on the national priorities for sustainable development and to have the right policies. Out of these consultations, allow me to please highlight the following proposals. First, that we continue with the implementation of inclusive environmental education programs which are accessible at all educational levels for the population, which advocate for changes in practices and conduct related to consumption and plastics, as well as other highly dangerous pollutants for human health. Secondly, to promote more investment in green energy solutions based on nature, scientific research and technical capacity, and making sure that we adopt some of the uses and customs of the ancestral traditions of the indigenous peoples which work in harmony with nature, and to conserve food security and sustainable management for natural resources. Thirdly, to deal with the lack of financial measures to generate public-private alliances in order to strengthen resilience, adaptation, mitigation, and that this be agile and of quality. We would like to highlight the fact that these solutions need to be in line with our nationally determined contributions in each country, as well as the national priorities for development, Agenda 2030, and other multilateral instruments incorporating a gender approach, indigenous peoples, youth, and those with particular abilities to achieve sustainable development for a healthy planet. I conclude by recalling that it's important to make sure that during this conference we move towards concrete actions, specific actions, and towards a blue and green transition that is just and inclusive of all of the people on this planet. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative of Guatemala for his statement. I now give the floor to Ms. Ina Cocheru, Vice President of the Environmental Commission of the Parliament of the Republic of Moldova.
Thank you, Mr. President, Excellencies, dear ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the hosts for the excellent organization of this very important event. The Republic of Moldova, situated between Romania and Ukraine, undergoes a challenging time caused by the Russian Federation aggression against Ukraine, which triggered the largest humanitarian and refugee crisis in the region. And so we stand with the courageous people of Ukraine. And the crisis is amplified by pandemia and the problems in energetic sector, which have a more adverse impact on economy and on the environment. But still, our shared responsibility is to ensure the right of citizens to a healthy environment by improving its quality and promoting rational use of natural resources. In September 2015, the Republic of Moldova adopted the declaration of the Sustainable Development Summit and recognized that environment protection became a priority in our country. The government of the Republic of Moldova has set 3 priorities for the upcoming years on the global objectives of combating the negative effects of climate change. And these are zero waste, which focuses on waste hierarchy and waste recovery through the circular economy, which will allow us to significantly reduce the volumes of uncontrolled landfill waste, good water quality, and the strategic actions of intervention, which includes efficient management of wastewater and water resources of Dniester and Prut transboundary rivers, collaborating in this sense with our neighbors, Romania and Ukraine, and expansion of afforested areas by 100,000 hectares in the next 10 years, and planting more than 500 million forest seedlings in the country. The Republic of Moldova is fully committed to the Paris Agreement objectives, and the cause to this are nationally determined contributions. In 2020, Moldova revised NDCs, and the new unconditional target, which includes the entire economy of the country, provides for a cut in greenhouse gas emission by 70% by 2030, compared to 190 instead of 64 assumed in intended NDCs. Finally, I would draw attention to the need to raise awareness of environmental issues in our society, as every human action or inaction has an impact on the environment. Dear friends, many of the new engagements in environment and climate change require tremendous effort for the developing countries such as Moldova to be implemented. But nothing is impossible when you are not afraid to achieve these ambitious goals. I am afraid of only one thing, of depleted resources and seriously polluted environment we could leave for our children. For me and for my country, the objective of Sweden's government on leaving a safe environment for next generation became an inspiration and an additional motivation to implement the environmental objectives in Moldova. And the priority of Moldova is European integration, and for this we sent a request to become a candidate of the EU. Therefore, the battle for a safe environment was not conquered yet, and we still need to convert many others in our environmental religion. So let us stand together, more ambitious and determined for a greener future. And I would like to thank you for your attention, and I wish us luck and peace in Europe and in the whole world. Thank you.
I thank the Vice President of the Environment Commission of the Parliament of the Republic of Moldova for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Vanuatu.
Excellencies, it is my great honor to join you in this international meeting as Stockholm+50 to commemorate 50 years since the United Nations Conference on the Environment was held in these 50 years. In these 50 years, the global community has achieved various milestones to address our environment and climate challenges. We have adopted the Paris Agreement, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and soon to be the new Global Treaty on Plastic Pollution. Despite this, we continue to face increasing adverse climatic events, increasing pollution, and biodiversity loss. The recent IPCC report is our reality check and has concluded that, and I quote, "It is unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land, and failure to take urgent and ambitious action will lead to dire consequences." Given the magnitude of the threats that our planet is facing today, and that the negative environmental and climate impacts are global market failures, strengthened cooperation and comprehensive action at all levels are essential. There are still a lot for us to achieve. An area that we can achieve is to encourage an international cooperation to stop the production of fossil fuels. The Russian and Ukraine crisis revealed our energy security continues to depend heavily on fossil fuels. However, we must not use it as an excuse to continue to rely on carbon, but we must continue to deepen our efforts towards just transition. The health of the global ocean is critical, and it has special significance to the Pacific Islands. It is now widely known that the ocean provides ecosystem services that are essential for sustaining life on our planet, from providing more than 50% of the Earth's oxygen to regulating the planet's climate. However, our future is in danger of the health and resilience of the global ocean are threatened from the impacts of climate change and other anthropogenic activities. Protecting the ocean is a matter of agency for seeds, as our future and identity depends on it. Given that Vanuatu is ranked by the UN as the most highly refinable country in the world and is beset by frequent natural disasters every year, the Vanuatu Parliament on the 27th of May 2022 declared a climate emergency. Vanuatu has thus become the first Pacific Island country to declare a climate emergency. As you may probably know, Vanuatu is currently campaigning for legal protection from climate change. In 2021, Vanuatu announced its goal to seek an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice with a view to clarify states' legal obligations to protect the rights of the present and future generations from climate change. We are calling on all the UN member states to support this resolution. The Stockholm+50 provides a major platform for all of us to rethink about our environment and climate challenges, and together we can collaborate on how to address them. The risk of not making the best use of this historic opportunity are too great. As suggested by current scientific evidence, and especially the latest IPCC report, failure to take urgent and ambitious action will lead to dire consequences. We need to turn rhetoric to action now. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Vanuatu for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Marshall Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. In the interest of time, all protocol observed. While we are gathered here to mark a key moment, I have century ago, the foundation of sustainable development. The world is slipping into a grave crisis. The important promises of the 1972 Stockholm Declaration have been the building blocks of what is now a shared global approach. We all have development aspirations, and these must be balanced with wider social and economic responsibility. A responsibility to our populations, our resources, and to each other. But these promises have been woefully neglected, in particular by major economies, where there is assistance and finance, it too often fails to make an impact at scale for those most in need and those most vulnerable, and those whose economies are developing at unprecedented rates, and oftentimes doing so without regard for consequences. My low-lying atoll island nation is paying an unacceptable price for this global inertia. Rising seas threaten to overtop our very land. The aspirations of the Paris Agreement are not fully met. Global emissions continue to rise because the hope of sustainable development has not met up with the economic reality of unchecked growth. In the islands, we are awash in plastic waste, much of it from halfway across the world. Our main cultural and economic resource, our oceans and fisheries, are threatened by a reckless disregard for climate emissions and illegal harvesting. We need to design and implement sustainable development in a new way to meet today's reality and rapidly changing global economy, we cannot afford to rest on grand words or squabble over political interpretation. But as a collective United Nations, we are failing the world and failing the most vulnerable because for decades, too many of us have failed to turn the Stockholm principles in action and practice. The related and well-worn argument over sustainable development make me think that the UN itself has entered its own separate reality and cannot respond to the obvious crisis in front of it. As the United Nations, our very public credibility is at stake. What the world needs most is not to redesign global structures, but to start with some honesty and trust, to rebuild the Stockholm Declaration with mutual accountability and political will. The future of my island nation and of our future generations depend upon it. We demand strong action now. Time is running out. Thank you so much, Excellencies. And I want to pay tribute to the Majesty, the Royal Kingdom of Sweden, the government, and the co-chairs for your kind hospitality. We're very most welcome and we appreciate it very much. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Marshall Islands for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Eritrea.
Thank you, Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to address you this afternoon on behalf of the government of the state of Eritrea. It heightens our concerns to think that we are losing the fight of protecting our one and only planet. But this is the reality of the situation. No Glasgow Pact nor renewed commitments can undo the harm done to our planet unless we start living by our promises. While we are celebrating the Stockholm+50 International Meeting and commemorating the 1972 UN Conference on the Human Environment, we should keep this following in mind. What is our world looking like today compared to 50 years ago? Not in terms of numbers of conventions held, but what actual advancement have we made to secure a healthy planet for all? The government of the state of Eritrea enacted a national ban on plastic bags in early 2005. Today, Eritreans use cloth, nylon, or straw bags, many of which are locally manufactured. Eritrea, as one of the countries in the developing world whose greenhouse gas emission footprint is close to none, is committed to embark on a carbon-neutral sustainable development pathway within the decade of action. Realizing the critical importance of biodiversity and ecosystem services in supporting economic growth, sustainable development, livelihood, and human well-being, and its contribution to achieving the 2030 Agenda, the government of the state of Eritrea has developed and mainstreamed a national biodiversity strategy and action plan that encompass 18 ecosystem-based targets, mainly on marine, agriculture, and terrestrial setting. Eritrea is committed to undertake effective measures to stop the loss of and protect biodiversity and ecosystem services, which is fundamental to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and rebuilding a resilient post-pandemic world. Eritrea, like most other countries of our region, has a very vulnerable ecosystem. It is among the countries hardest hit by the effects of climate change due to its geographic location and low adaptive capability. Reoccurrent drought, unpredictable patterns of rainfall with spatial and temporal variability, and subsequent water scarcity and depletion, crop failure and livestock death, genetic erosion and loss of endemic species, and the list goes on. All these difficulties, unless skillfully addressed, will erode the resilience of communities and add up the embedment of poverty and challenge of development progress. Eritrea acknowledges the need for a clear strategic framework so as to contribute to averting global biodiversity loss. This indeed will contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals and pave the way for the attainment of the vision, living in harmony with nature. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, The reference to political will is often made in various fora, but the political will is determined by all of us, the international community. On this occasion, let us renew our commitments and show solidarity with the countries most affected by climate change, and let us ensure that another 50 years won't pass by without having secured a safer planet for generations to come. Eritrea, with all its challenges, past and present, is fully committed to adhere to the commitments it made under the UNFCCC Convention, and it's guided by the principles therein. I thank you for your kind attention.
I thank the representative of Eritrea for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Sri Lanka.
Mr. President, Excellencies, at the outset, Sri Lanka congratulates you as the co-chair of this seminal Stockholm+50 conference and the Bureau, and convey to you all here the greetings of the Honorable Minister of the Environment of Sri Lanka, who, due to unavoidable circumstances, was unable to be physically present, but joins us in spirit and in commitment for the success of this conference. Addressing the challenges relating to climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution is firmly engraved in Sri Lanka's development policy orientation, especially in the Vistas of Prosperity and Splendor program of the government, which is well aligned with the SDGs. As all of us are aware, the triple planetary crisis is clearly of a transboundary nature and requires transboundary partnership to mitigate impacts with targeted international, regional, and national action. For Sri Lanka, too, climate change is no longer a phenomenon of the future, but a challenge of today. Biodiversity loss is immediate, and pollution is both real and economically costly. The COVID pandemic, global economic downturn, and high inflation are affecting developing countries, including Sri Lanka, economically. Urgent, sustained assistance is required to mitigate the impacts of livelihoods and the environment. Sri Lanka, an island nation in the Indian Ocean, is party to all major international environmental conventions and has creatively addressed some of the challenges with whole of government and stakeholder approach, and therefore, in partnership with civil society, is implementing programs to mitigate challenges and impacts. Key actionable policy steps include, in order to pursue the greener economy, we have established a network of dedicated committees to address a variety of local and transboundary challenges such as biodiversity, plastics, sustainable approach to climate action. The updated environmental action plan also focuses on a range of environmental challenges. We're committed to achieve 70% of power generation from renewable energy by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2050. We are partners in the No New Coal Alliance. Creative ways to manage and preserve biodiversity and habitat have been introduced, such as the conservation of the environmental sensitive areas located just outside the periphery of the traditional protected areas. Sri Lanka's oceans policy is strongly embedded in our development orientation, with principles of the blue economy expected to have notable footprint. With Sri Lanka's leadership, the 5th UNEA adopted a resolution on the sustainable nitrogen management. The need for enhanced capacity to respond rapidly to marine disasters is island nation is borne out by the disaster of the MV Express Pearl in Sri Lanka, which spewed chemicals and pellets, plastic pellets, to the detriment of the environment. We call for redoubled disbursement of resources for climate action, and in doing so, eligibility criteria should not be restricted to the economic benchmarks. The vulnerability criteria and special considerations for small economies should be equally applicable to access finance and capacity building. Sri Lanka conveys its appreciation to the governments of Sweden and Kenya for hosting this conference and the dynamic role of the UNEP in our common cause. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Sri Lanka for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Bhutan.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor of conveying the warm greetings of His Majesty the King and the best wishes of the people and government of Bhutan for the success of this special meeting. Mr. President, Stockholm 50 is a momentous occasion for us to reflect and take stock of the last 50 years and further accords us the opportunity to take decisive action while there is still time. The recent IPCC report provided a stark reminder that the window of opportunity to save our planet from irreversible damage is fast disappearing. The triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution must be thwarted at all costs. If not enlightened self-interest, the moral obligation to preserve intergenerational equity should weigh on our collective conscience. Mr. President, in preparation for this historic meeting, Bhutan undertook a series of multi-stakeholder consultations to take stock and review our implementation of the 3 multilateral conventions of UNFCCC, CBD, and UNCCD, and our achievements of the SDGs. It also provided the opportunity to outline a roadmap to Bhutan 2050 and identify support needed to achieve those goals. Mr. President, Bhutan's commitment to the environment remains unwavering. Our rich biological diversity has not only survived, but continues to thrive. With 72% of our forests, of our territory under forest cover, Bhutan is a net sequester of carbon, earning us the distinction of being the first carbon-negative country in the world. Bhutan's experience has demonstrated that the linchpin of all our efforts has been gross national happiness and the firm conviction that progress and prosperity does not have to come at the cost of nature and environmental integrity. Bhutan's pristine environment remains the enduring legacy of our successive monarchs. Yet the road has not been without challenges. Even as the world continues to struggle towards recovery from the global pandemic, the persistent and slow-moving threat of the triple crisis has provided a grim backdrop. As guardians of some of the world's highest peaks, straddling what is known as the third pole, Bhutan is deeply concerned over the impact of climate change on our fragile mountain ecosystems. This threatens livelihoods, food security, biodiversity, and the economic sustainability of the country. At the same time, without adequate and predictable financial and technological and capacity support, developing countries, particularly LDCs and SIDS, will be unable to achieve the 2030 Agenda or the Paris Agreement. New and additional climate finance, including for loss and damage, must be urgently mobilized and balance achieved between financing for mitigation and adaptation. Going forward, we need to forge strong international partnerships to scale up investments in alternative renewable energy, particularly in the manufacturing and transport sectors. Mr. President, our actions today will go a long way towards securing a green and sustainable future for generations to come. We remain ready to lead, contribute, and partner with our stakeholders in this endeavor. Thank you, and Tashidile.
I thank the representative of Bhutan for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Yutaka Shoda, Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs of Japan.
Thank you, President. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to the governments of Sweden and Kenya, the UNEP Secretary General,
of the attendees and all those who have contributed to holding this event. I'm honored to deliver this message on behalf of the Japanese government at this important event commemorating the 15th anniversary of the United Nations Conference on Human Environment, which marked the history of environment administration. The Stockholm Conference followed the historical establishment of Japan's Environment Agency in 1971. At first, pollution, such as air pollution in Japan, was one of the issues of concern, but in the following 50 years, global environmental issues such as climate change and biodiversity loss have become more apparent. New topics have emerged, such as marine plastic litter and the establishment of a circular economy. It has become primordial to address environmental issues not only domestically but also internationally. Therefore, we have worked hand in hand with the international community. Japan's public and private sectors are working together to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. For example, in order to achieve digital transformation and a decarbonized society at the same time, Japan is promoting integrated climate change countermeasures, including promotion of renewable energy in data centers and EVs in transport sector. In September 2020, Japan launched Platform for Redesign 2020 on recovery from COVID-19 pandemic and climate change environmental measures. This online platform consolidates initial actions and knowledge on the measures in each country, and this information accumulated here can be useful for each country. Regarding biodiversity, Japan is committed to nature positivity and the 30 by 30 target. This April, Japan formulated a roadmap for achieving this goal. Japan supports the inclusion of the 30 by 30 target in the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. As an international contribution, we also announced the launch of the second phase of the Japan Biodiversity Fund in the first part of COP15 to support developing countries. Regarding the circular economy, Japan will continue to drive efforts towards the worldwide transition to a circular economy through the Global Alliance on Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency. We will also cooperate and contribute to the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, which will start this year to discuss an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including marine environment. The Global Conference on Strengthening Synergies between the Paris Agreement and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development will be held in Tokyo next month. Through sharing of good practices and other activities, we will raise the ambition towards a 1.5-degree goal and build a basis for synergistic action to achieve the SDGs. We will continue work in cooperation with other countries to solve global environment problems. Russia's aggression against Ukraine have caused serious damage to the environment. So we strongly condemn Russia and call on the country to withdraw its troops immediately and unconditionally. In any conditions, our determination to address climate change and other global environment issues is unwavering. Lastly, environment issues know no borders. Let's continue to work hand in hand to realize a healthy planet for the prosperity of all. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs of Japan for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Peru.
Señores
Vice Presidents, 50 years ago, the dream of making sure that we could coincide these two issues of environment and humans was a historic milestone in 1972. And it drew our attention to two aspects relating to human development and the environment, the natural and the artificial, the environment, the science and technology. 50 years later, science and technology have placed us in the digital world and the planet of artificial intelligence. the capacity of man to transform his environment has evolved exponentially. However, we cannot say the same for the impact of human action over the last 50 years in the evolution of the natural environment. Over the last 5 decades, the health of the Earth has deteriorated because of climate change, because of deforestation, because of desertification, because of chemical pollution, the loss of biodiversity, the excess level of nitrogen, the increase in pollution, the reduction of ecosystem services, the loss of biodiversity, and the unjust imbalance across many regions of the world in terms of ecosystem resources. These challenges, 5 decades after the 1972 Stockholm meeting, have shown us that we cannot achieve 1.5 degrees Celsius nor deal with the plastic pollution in the oceans unless we work together. 8 million tons of plastic are poured into the oceans, and if we don't reverse this trend, there will be more plastic than fish in our oceans, and this is why Peru has presented, with Rwanda, the now adopted resolution on a legally binding instrument to end plastic pollution. And this was a difficult effort, but we must make sure that we commit to the negotiations on this important agreement with our allies to have a legally binding instrument to end plastic pollution as a specific obligation for industrialized nations. And if we do not reverse this trend, we will move towards a disaster in our environment. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, was emphatic that we have to make sure that we do not continue in our auto-destructive manner. It will be suicidal if we do. Certainly, the situation in the world is critical and dangerous, but perhaps now the moment is recognized. We must not just speak, we must make sure that we take decisive action by 2030, a reduction by 45% of GHG, and make a reality the treaty against plastic pollution. I thank you so much, Vice Presidents.
I thank the representative of Peru for his statement. And I now give the floor to Mr. Almas Isanov, Head of the Political and Economic Research Department, Presidential Administration of Kyrgyzstan. Please.
Dear President, dear participants, 50 years ago, Her Excellency Indira Gandhi started an invasion. It was an invasion of idea of environment protection and sustainable development. There is a proverb, you are able to resist an army invasion. You are not able to resist the invasion of ideas. I am from the country with mountains covering 95% of its territory. Kyrgyzstan became an example on how climate change badly influences on mountains ecosystems that have a global value for economic, ecologic, and water supply benefits. Mountains ecosystem require much more careful attitude to save biodiversity. Mountains forests reduce greenhouse gas emission and create a certain ecosystems. Kyrgyzstan takes an important mission on glacier conservation. For 40 years, 25% of total glacier volume was lost, and for 2050, reduction of 1/2 is forecast. Clean rivers from show peaks provides a well-being, energy, and food security for the 70 million people in Central Asia. Our mountains supply 75% of waters to neighbor countries. Kyrgyzstan has a very small volume of emission, while declared ambition goals for mitigation for 2030 and carbon neutrality for 2050. For the implementation of these goals, the President of Kyrgyzstan, His Excellency Mr. Sadir Japarov, declared 2022 as a year of mountains ecosystem protection and climate sustainability. As a part of this, a national campaign, Green Legacy, for climate sustainability and intensive increase for forests was initiated. Kyrgyzstan actively supports the development of special UN program for mountains forests and invites international partners and organizations to support our initiative. For successful climate action, the biggest emitters should speed up transformation of their industries and consumption system to low carbon profile. Greening the economy, the developing mountains country means transfer of technology, but first step should be very simple. For example, to use sustainable transport and reduce the plastic waste. Now we should understand the human beings, or Homo sapiens, are the only one of the species on this planet, only one that is responsible for climate change. It is not virtual responsibility, it is real. Please not exaggerate the virtual reality while we have real problems. As His Excellency, Secretary General of United Nations, Antonio Guterres stated, we have only one planet. We have to admit the responsibility over the future and long-term planning. Thank you.
Thank you. I thank the representative of Kyrgyzstan for his statement. And I now give the floor to Mr. James Larson, Deputy Secretary in the Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment of Australia. Please, the floor is yours.
Madam Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, first let me extend Australia's thanks to Sweden for their excellent hosting arrangements, Kenya as co-chair, and the UNEP Secretariat for the preparatory arrangements for this conference. I'd also like to pay my respects to those First Nations peoples present in Stockholm today. We recognise there is no greater challenge than climate change and its impact on a healthy planet and prosperity for all. We acknowledge the economic and security threat it poses and know that we must act now to advance climate action through reducing emissions, scaling up clean energy technology, and enhancing adaptation and resilience efforts. The new Australian government is committed to boosting our efforts to place Australia on track to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, and we will do this by reducing carbon emissions by 43% on 2005 levels by 2030, submitting a new nationally determined contribution to the UNFCCC, introducing new emissions reductions policies, and preparing Australia to become a clean energy superpower, including a $20 billion upgrade to the electricity grid to support more renewable energy. Australia will also commit to new climate partnerships and financing efforts, particularly with our neighbours in the Indo-Pacific. The Australian continent is at the forefront of climate change impacts, and this is no more evident than on our iconic Great Barrier Reef, one of the world's great natural wonders. We will work hard to protect its future from climate impacts by further investing in restoration, preservation, and through real action on climate change. We understand the impacts caused by unsustainable patterns of consumption and production on our natural world, and that to improve the health of our environment, we will need to transition to a more sustainable future. a future that will be built on sustainable manufacturing, sustainable procurement, and one that is focused on reducing waste and boosting recycling. These are amongst the key priorities for the Australian government. We are mindful of the challenges we continue to face from the COVID-19 pandemic, and Australia will continue to work closely with our neighbours in the Indo-Pacific region to assist with a sustainable recovery. Finally, First Nations peoples have a special connection and relationship with their natural environments. Their interests and voices are vital to these discussions. Australia values the traditional knowledge of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in helping manage and conserve our unique and varied land and seascapes. Our Indigenous Protected Areas Network reflects the critical role of our First Nations people in the conservation and restoration of our natural environment. Our Indigenous Rangers program provides jobs in regional and remote communities, maintains connection to country, and grows local economies. Over the next decade, we will boost our funding for Indigenous protected areas, double the number of our Indigenous rangers, and ensure those rangers are playing a lead role in the preservation of the Great Barrier Reef and other sites of natural significance. Together, we have come a long way since Stockholm 1972, but we have still a long way to go. We recognise the progress made at this forum and remain cognizant of existing commitments made, including the Glasgow Pact, in addressing the challenges facing our environment. The challenges we face remain difficult and require collective and immediate action, and Australia remains ready to contribute to that. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy Secretary in the Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment of Australia for his statement. And I now give the floor to the representative of China. Please, the floor is yours.
Distinguished President, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Chinese government, I wish to extend my warmest congratulations to the Stockholm+50. The first meeting of the UN Conference on Human Environment 50 years ago was the start of joint action to protect the Earth, which symbolizes humankind's awakening on environmental issues. Over the past 50 years, China has been deepening its understanding on the basic law of the human-nature relationship, following the basic principle of resource conservation and environmental protection, implementing the strategy of sustainable development, and actively participating in the global environmental governance. Over the past decades, President Xi Jinping's thought on ecological progress has guided China. China has been putting ecological progress high on an agenda and making efforts that are of fundamental, trailblazing, and long-term, which has seen unprecedented concreteness, intensity, and effectiveness. First, China has made coordinated efforts. China's forest coverage has reached 23%, contributing to 25% of the world's newly added green and 20% of the world's restored land. Second, China has been optimizing its industry energy structure and pursuing green, low-carbon, and circular economy, with its per capita GDP coal consumption significantly reduced and the usage of renewable energy ranking #1 in the world. Third, China has been resolutely combating pollution and improving the environment, with the quality of air and surface quality continuously improving. Fourth, China has been deeply participating in global environmental governance, including promoting the entering into force of the Paris Agreement, announcing the goal of carbon emission peaking and neutrality, and ceasing to build coal-fired plants overseas. China has successfully held the first session of COP15, adopted the Kunming Declaration, and set up 1.5 billion RMB to set up a protection fund, which injected strong political momentum into biodiversity protection. Going forward, China will continue to work with other members to protect Mother Earth by working together and share this beautiful world and prosperous future. We must follow the principle of harmonious coexistence between human and nature. We must respect, follow, and protect nature, and resolutely promote green and low-carbon development and transition. We must uphold the idea of a community with a shared future. We must unite, act fast, and be committed to a model of sustainable development featuring increased production, higher living standard, and healthy ecosystems. We must commit to multilateralism. We must honor international convention and adhere to the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capacities. Dear colleagues, President Xi Jinping proposed the Global Development Initiative at the 76th session of the UN General Assembly, calling on the international community to attach importance to climate change and green development, which was positively received. China stands ready to increase cooperation with other parties under GDI, mobilize global resources, revitalize global partnerships, and create synergy for implementing of the 2030 agenda. Long and difficult as it might seem, sustained action will get us to the destination. Let's build on past efforts and join hands to build a healthy planet for shared prosperity. Thank you.
I thank the representative of China for his statement. And I now give the floor to the representative of Paraguay.
Muy buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. President, Vice President, first and foremost, I extend my gratitude to the host countries, to this very important assembly. An assembly to which the Republic of Paraguay is happy to participate to reaffirm our commitment to the Stockholm Declaration and to commemorate 50 years of constant work initiated in this city with the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment, which recognized for the first time the interdependence between environment, human rights, development, and poverty. However, reaffirming and commemorating is not enough, as it is hoped that the high authorities will once again agree to implement additional measures to address the crisis caused by biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution. These threaten the existence of humanity. So far, ladies and gentlemen, we have not managed to make the collective actions that we have implemented to catch up with the speed of the deterioration of our environment. And this is a race that must be won at all costs, with the active participation of all stakeholders, governments, civil society, and businesses. We start from the fact that for all states present here, this is a priority challenge, which must be reflected in public policies. In this context, in 2020, Paraguay began a process of institutional strengthening in order to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 agenda through the restructuring and the hierarchy of the commission responsible for promoting the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, which now has representation from the 3 branches of government. Also, ladies and gentlemen, in July 2021, in the middle of the pandemic, Paraguay has submitted updated nationally determined contributions in compliance with the historic Paris Agreement. President, Paraguay is one of the world's leading producers of clean and renewable energy and is also a major player in the production of food for the world. Therefore, we call the attention of this assembly to the fact that although our historical contribution to global greenhouse gas emissions is small, the negative impact on the society, our natural resources, and our productive structure is high, as is our vulnerability to climate change, which is enhanced by our condition as a landlocked, developing country. We are also aware that the responsibility is collective and common to all states. In other words, we know that we have the responsibility in mitigation and solution each and every one of us. However, we also know that the main burden of the solution has to be distributed in a balanced way according to the national capacities and specific responsibilities of each state. This is to say, according to their effective contribution to the deteriorating situation that concerns us today. In this context, President, it is of particular relevance to strengthen financing to support mitigation and adaptation efforts in developing countries, especially those that are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change, and taking into account their specific needs and their particular circumstances. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I thank the representative of Paraguay. And I also now give the floor to Mr. Yusuf Diallo, Director of International Organization at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Senegal.
Merci beaucoup, Madame le Vice-Président.
Thank you very much, Vice Presidents, Excellencies, Ministers, distinguished guests in your various ranks and grades. On behalf of Bahar Macky Sall, Minister for the Environment and Sustainable Development of Senegal, on his behalf, and in fact he is also the president of the Interministerial African Conference on the Environment and the least developed countries working on climate change, I should like to extend to you our gratitude for organizing this event, Stockholm+50, A Healthy Planet, for the prosperity of all, our responsibility, our opportunity. The Minister very much wanted to be here today, but he's indisposed. He's in Dakar because of other commitments. Given that an internationally legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including marine plastic pollution, is being negotiated, at the last UNEA meeting, which was held in March in Nairobi, we saw that multilateralism can still make a significant contribution to tackling the challenges of our time, including environmental protection. I should like to extend our heartfelt congratulations to Sweden and Kenya, our co-presidents. You've done a stellar job organizing these events and also contributed to environmental protection. Back in 1972, here in Stockholm, we laid the groundwork for our future work on environmental protection, including awareness raising about this phenomenon. Senegal has been very active on this front. Currently, we have a specific plan which the President of our Republic, Macky Sall, has been actively promoting. Ladies and gentlemen, climate change is one of the most complex crises of our time. You all know that. And there are many, many challenges facing all of our countries, especially the most vulnerable ones. We must do everything within our power to keep global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. We need a transformative approach, buttressing the resilience of our economies and our people. This is all the more salient for the least developed countries. As you know, these countries have been the hardest hit by the nefarious effects of climate change, resulting in loss of human life, flooding, drought, infrastructural destruction, biodiversity loss, and problems in the agricultural sector. Of course, there are many obstacles strewn in our path. However, we are doing everything we can to achieve the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda and the African Union's 2063 plan. We're also focusing on food security, migration within a comprehensive geopolitical context. The list goes on. From our viewpoint, in order to be able to confront these challenges, we need to be clear-sighted about the deadlines and about what needs to be done. In particular, we need to ensure that we have adequate financing to achieve what we want to achieve. The Paris Agreement is more than just an agreement. It instills hope in all of us. It instills hope that we'll be able to go down the path of sustainable development, a carbon-neutral, resilient path, saving us from climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, There is no alternative. We must pool our efforts. We owe it to this generation and subsequent generations. So let's walk hand in hand down this path to ensure that we do justice to this agreement, taking operational decisions to ensure that there's sufficient financing to implement our decisions. The sound has been cut off. The interpreter apologizes. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Directeur.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that intervention on behalf of the Minister.
Greece.
Madam Vice President, Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, it is an honor to deliver this statement at this very important meeting, and I would like to thank the host country, Sweden, as well as Kenya for their initiative. Celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Stockholm 1972 conference and of UNEP is a source of inspiration and an opportunity to reflect on achievements and challenges. UNEP plays a pivotal role in redefining our perceptions by fostering the science policy interface and coordinating responses to complex global issues, including multilateral environmental agreements. Let me make some special reference to the Regional Seas Programme, in particular to the Mediterranean Action Plan, for translating the global agenda down at the regional level and advancing implementation. Sustainability must be on the very top of our glossary, as governments, citizens, institutions, or companies. In Greece, we are currently implementing a massive green transformation of our economy, perceiving environment as a vital resource. Our national climate law defines our transition to net zero by 2050, setting ambitious intermediate targets for 2030 and 2040, with quantitative emission reduction targets for all sectors of the economy. As a hotspot for endemic and rich ecosystems, Greece is committed to declaring as nature-protected areas 30% of land and sea by 2030. Our national reforestation plan provides for more than 30 million trees. Being inherently linked to the sea, we support the transformation of the Mediterranean to a model sea by 2030. We place special emphasis on green shipping and tourism while converting our islands to innovation labs. A small Greek island, famous for the Antikythera mechanism, the first computer in world history, is now becoming a state-of-the-art observatory for climate change in the Mediterranean. Tilos, another small island, is becoming a pioneer in circular economy and recycling through the innovative program Just Go Zero Tilos, and serves as an example of integrated waste management for all small islands. We're also committed to reduce plastic litter at sea by 50% by 2030 and microplastics by 30%, as well as overfishing by declaring 10% of our seas as no-take reserves by 2030. Still, challenges grow faster than our responses, as the triple planetary crisis is escalating. But working together, we can shape a sustainable and inclusive future on a healthy planet. Thank you.
Thank you to the representative of Greece for your statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Poland. The floor is yours.
Madam Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished guests. When Stockholm+50 was planned last year, we knew that we need to accelerate efforts to tackle the triple planetary challenge of climate change, biodiversity loss, and environmental pollution. We knew that we need to find the consequences of the devastating COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, the unprovoked and unjustified Russian Federation's large-scale aggression against people of Ukraine caused another terrible crisis. There is no sustainable development without peace. The war has already destroyed billions of dollars worth of infrastructure and displaced more than 12 million people. We cannot turn a blind eye on the large-scale environmental damage caused by the invasion. Poland has been continually supporting Ukraine. About 3 million refugees have found new home in my country. Polish government is working on a concrete offer to assist Ukraine in the post-war reconstruction. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to warmly thank the host country, Sweden, as well as Kenya, for this meeting. We gather here to talk about a better future for our planet. In this respect, let me tell a few words about the importance of urban policy in the context of climate and environmental objectives. The policy is crucial for the daily functioning of citizens. Poland wants to adapt its cities to a changing climate, mainly through appropriate use of green areas, rational and efficient water management, and the concreting of cities. Poland has developed urban adoption plans for its 44 largest cities. We also prepared a package of legislative, financial, and educational instruments that will support cities in their pro-climate transformation. We are aiming to reduce the coal consumption for individual heating in cities and increasing the use of renewable energy sources. We consequently support the development of ecological, low and zero-emission public and individual transport in cities. Last but not least, let me invite you to the 11th World Urban Forum, which will be held in Katowice from 26 to 30 June 2022, under the motto, Transforming Our Cities for a Better Urban Future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, the representative of Poland, for your statement. And I now give the floor to Mr. Ahmed Yusuf Ahmed, Director General of Environment and Climate Change of Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to express my gratitude for having the opportunity to be present at the 2022 Stockholm+50 International Conference. I would like also to extend my gratitude to the government of Sweden in a collaboration with the government of Kenya for organizing this international conference. We also thank the government of Sweden for the warm hospitality. Somalia is facing the brunt of climate change while also experiencing constant conflict and instability. The country is currently experiencing its worst drought in over 4 decades, which is especially daunting considering the fact that the country has already faced 3 major droughts in the last 10 years. 80% of the country is currently affected, with over 6 million people in urgent need of food and humanitarian assistance, bridging on a famine levels. Somali communities also regularly experiencing devastating floods, where lives, crops, and infrastructure are often lost. According to the most recent climate projections, these shocks are only set to become more common and destructive. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, resource-based conflict, poverty, and food distress are becoming constant features that we believe are being driven and exacerbated by climate change. Unfortunately, we suffer these effects despite being the least contributor to the problem of greenhouse gases. In Somali finance that the Somalia receive, the climate finance that the Somalia received is not enough to support the Somalia efforts in combating the effect of climate change. Green climate financing is often difficult for a fragile state to attain. For example, the Green Climate Fund and the Global Environmental Facility are not made applicable to fragile states context or take many years to deliver a project. We need to push to climate financing to be more accessible for fragile states, which are often, as the case in Somalia, the countries which we have contributed the least to global climate change are yet facing the worst consequences, or at the very least, wealthier countries need to at least stick at the 100 billion on climate finance commitments. A bill. Somalia and other poor countries are paying with the livelihoods for a problem not of our making. It is therefore our loud call and the countries emitting the most to start acting on the issue, especially so now that we know and what the problem is, and we know the action is needed. Thank you for your kind attention.
I thank the Director General of Environment and Climate Change of Somalia for his statement. And I now give the floor to the representative of Croatia.
Madam Vice President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to have the opportunity to be a part of this significant anniversary and to address you on behalf of the Republic of Croatia. I would like to thank Sweden, Kenya, and UNEP Secretariat for their efforts and a very successful organization of this meeting. You've got our statement in written, so let's go to the main points directly. Despite many positive outcomes of global efforts, the triple planetary crisis, climate change, loss of biodiversity, and global pollution, and their consequences represent a direct threat to humanity and life on the planet as we know it. These emergencies must be addressed together. In addition, it is still impossible to fully grasp the long-term consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. In this regard, I would like to emphasize that Croatia strongly supports full implementation of the One Health approach as a response to future pandemics, which fosters interaction among the health of humans, animals, and planets, and underlines the urgent need for continued close work among the FAO, OE, WHO, UNEP, together with other relevant stakeholders. Croatia will continue to promote this approach as part of its ECOSOC membership. The global goals we have set cannot be called into question. Most mechanisms for their realization have already been created or are in the process of negotiation. We need ambition and unity in implementing the agreed commitments on the road to sustainability. This year's UNEA sessions resulted in vital resolutions, and we believe in their implementation. We are also convinced that the statements made in the political declaration to renew efforts at all levels to enhance implementation of existing obligations and commitments under international environmental law will be met. We are also optimistic about the forthcoming meetings related to the future of Intergovernmental Negotiations Committee on Plastics and Open-Ended Working Group of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Let me conclude by saying that all our activities aim to ensuring the future of our planet and prosperity on it will yield results only with lasting peace and stability in the world. In this regard, we condemn the Russian aggression against Ukraine, in which thousands of civilians have already been killed, millions of civilians of Ukraine have been displaced, and which has caused unimaginable environmental damage. We are joining the call aimed at the Russian Federation to stop the aggression immediately and withdraw its forces from Ukraine, respecting its internationally recognized borders. Thank you all.
I thank the representative of Croatia for his statement, and now give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Madam Vice President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to first join all the previous speakers in expressing my sincerest gratitude to our host, Sweden, as well as Kenya, for the preparation and organization of this very important event, bringing together global environmental community. A lot has been achieved in the past 5 decades, and we have many reasons to celebrate. UNEP and NUNEA have proved to be a successful framework for action for environmental protection. We have agreed on many very important resolutions that have measurable and impactful results for the protection of global environment and our planet. This year's UNEA session has once again proved this with the particularly important resolutions on nature-based solutions and plastic pollution. These are very important steps going forward and prove that we have ambition and means for further success. We are meeting in Stockholm not only in time of horrible, unprovoked aggression of Russia in Ukraine, but also in a time of a many times mentioned triple planetary crisis that is characterized by climate change, the loss of biodiversity, and pollution. A crisis which is putting the well-being of current and future generations at unacceptable risk. We need to put our focus on the next 50 years of environmental protection immediately, as already now our unsustainable environmental patterns and relationship with nature is pushing the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals out of our reach. Therefore, we must remain optimistic and positive. The outcome of COP26 offered solid grounds for hope for years to come. With Glasgow Climate Pact, the international community reaffirmed its global responsibility to engage into ambitious climate action and thus keep the global warming to 1.5 degrees, as well as enhance efforts for adaptation and resilience with the role of nature and nature-based solutions at its core. And lastly, I would like to express our congratulations to everything that UNEP has achieved in the last 50 years and underline that Slovenia will continue to be its strong supporter going forward, as its actions and ambitions are more important than ever. And this opportunity here in Stockholm is already our chance to set out ambitious and goals for the years to come. And I thank you.
I thank also the representative of Slovenia, and I invite the representative of Tuvalu to take the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed, I want to thank the governments of Sweden and Kenya for hosting this very important meeting during these very difficult times. The COVID-19 pandemic and international conflicts have further degraded nature and the environment. Our obligations to protect the health of the environment has now become extremely important, but also more urgent than ever. The 2022 IPCC report and the United Nations Secretary General's report on our common agenda clearly noted that existing pledges and promises are not enough. We are losing the 1.5 target. We need to do things differently. We must do more and do it quickly, as the window to secure a healthy environment and planet for us and our future generations is closing rapidly. At the national level, we have banned the importation and use of single plastics. We have a national policy target to achieve 100% renewable energy in our electricity generation sector by 2025. We have also set up locally managed marine areas in all our islands. Our National Sustainable Development Strategy 2020 to 2030 prioritizes climate change and ocean. We have strengthened our national systems to enhance a whole-of-government and society approach to protecting the environment. Earlier this year, we canceled licenses we issued for deep-sea explorations until we are sure of the impacts of deep-sea mining on the health of the oceans. As an atoll nation extremely vulnerable to climate change and at risk of total submersion to sea level rise within this century, we believe that our only sustainable solution is to address climate change at the source, fossil fuel, which is the top threat to the climate and environment, contributing about 85% of carbon emissions annually. Until we address the climate crisis at the source, we will continue to degrade the environment and thereby transfer the economic and human costs of our inactions to our future generations. We are therefore encouraged that the Leadership Dialogue 1 explicitly references the need to facilitate a multilateral process to ensure a just and equitable phase out to fossil fuels and finance for the transition to be agreed by all countries. This language is vital and must remain and be strengthened to recognize the integral role of governments and international cooperation in global governance on fossil fuels, and the need for wealthy countries to move first to provide financial support to fossil fuel-dependent developing countries to enable a just transition. Finally, a just transition to renewables should respect the principle of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities of countries. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative of Tuvalu for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Costa Rica. The floor is yours.
Señora Vicepresidenta.
Vice President, Excellencies, for Costa Rica, it's an honor to be here at Stockholm+50, an opportunity to celebrate 50 years of multilateral work in the environmental field, which has achieved the transformation of ideas such as the interdependence between the protection of the environment, sustainable development, and human rights in concrete actions and multiple conventions and agreements. However, in spite of this increasing legal framework, we are still far from achieving the commitments that we have made, and we're running out of time. Costa Rica has committed itself when we abolished our army. We committed ourselves to sustainable development, deciding to dedicate our resources to the public policies as well as social security for all our citizens. We have an energy mix of 99% of renewable energies, pay for environmental services program, which over the last 25 years has allowed us to reverse the deforestation of 80% from the 80s to a current cover of 72%. In line with our NDCs, we have increased our forest cover by 60% and the protection of 30% of our oceans that is by 2030. This will be achieved by 2030. Together with France and the United Kingdom, we are leading the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and Persons, which has 100 countries party to it. Our goal is to protect at the very least 30% of our Earth by 2030. In order to achieve these ambitious goals, we have established public policies for the medium and long term, such as our National Plan for Decarbonization 2018-2050, the National Plan for Adaptation 2018-2050, and the Urban Environmental Agenda. These governmental policies in the medium and long term are following intersectoral consultations across stakeholders with civil society organizations, academia, scientists, the public-private sector, and local authorities. We believe that it is important to be inclusive and transparent in order to have policies that are reflections of all the commitments of the society. In line with this and within the process towards Stockholm+50, we underscore the importance of the result of our national Costa Rica consultations and the GRULAC consultations that emphasize the responsibility between partners to deal with environmental challenges, including more education for transformation towards a sustainable development model, the necessity to use development matrices that are above the GDP to promote economic recovery post-pandemic that is inclusive and sustainable, and to have sustainable consumption and production while promoting circular economy. We therefore call the Secretariat to inform us of to include the report in the resume of this meeting. We would like to recognize the work that has been carried out.
I thank the representative of Costa Rica and now invites the representative of Yemen. Please, the floor is yours.
مندوبة اليمن الموقرة. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol preserved. First of all, on behalf of the Republic of Yemen, allow me to extend my thanks and appreciation to the governments of Sweden and Kenya for the organization of this meeting. Our celebration of the 50th anniversary of Stockholm is an opportunity to work for the recovery of our planet and to have a true transformation and renewed our commitment to the idea of collective responsibility. The Republic of Yemen appreciates the role played by the United Nations Declarations on Human Development in 1972. It is the first document that recognizes the interdependence between development, poverty, and the world. Our meeting today is an opportunity for the international community to assess the previous stage with its successes and failures, and to look for better options and opportunities for the future of the humanity. Actually, we have more challenges, such as the increasing emissions, the loss of biodiversity, the chemical pollution, and the plastic waste, the spread of pandemics and microbes, the degradation of ecosystem services. All these are unprecedented challenges for humanity. These challenges need to be confronted and addressed. This can only be achieved through our honoring of all the commitments, pledges of the agreements, protocols, and instruments that we have committed to. We have to do so before the problems of deterioration of our natural habitat, food insecurity, damage of human health, weakening of the capacity of fragile societies, and reducing current and future development opportunities, especially for developing and less developed countries, especially those in conflict, let alone the inequality and imbalance in the use of resources and wars, before this becomes becomes unprecedented. Today, Yemen needs the whole world to be supporting it vis-à-vis the arrogance of the Houthi militias. They are threatening our marine environment, biodiversity, and the international economy. Among the crimes of these militias, they are holding the Safir vessel, which is deteriorating, and it is expected to be exploded or sunk. It carries more than 1 million of crude oil. It represents a time bomb in one of the most important world corridor for the supply of food as well as the vital supplies. It is not only affecting Yemen or the Red Sea countries, but the devastating impacts will be affecting the whole world. Allow us to pay tribute to the Kingdom of Netherlands for organizing the donor conference in order to help us solve this reservoir issues. We thank those who have helped us, and we hope that others will follow the same. Our country stresses the importance of honoring the commitments of developed countries in order to help our countries and the least developed countries. We need to get facilities and funds in order to achieve our environmental projects and to have technology transfer. In conclusion, we recognize the urgent and dire need to strengthen the common but differentiated responsibility. And the interpreter apologizes because the microphone is cut off.
By that, we thank the honorable representative of Yemen, and we have exhausted the speakers list, but the right of a reply has been requested. May I take that the international meeting wishes to limit statements in the exercise of the right of reply to three minutes for the first intervention and to 2 minutes for the second intervention? I hear no objections. It is so decided. So for the first intervention, I call on the representative of Armenia. Please, the floor is yours.
Madam Vice President, we wish to exercise our right of reply in connection with the statement made by the representative of Azerbaijan earlier today. It is indeed very unfortunate that Azerbaijan would use every opportunity and every platform for its anti-Armenian propaganda, and unfortunately, today's forum was not an exception. Armenia's path has been extremely difficult, especially during the last 2 years, as in addition to the COVID-related difficulties, we have to deal also with the consequences of most brutal and aggressive war in Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, unleashed by neighboring country Azerbaijan with the use of internationally banned weaponry. Such belligerence caused irreparable damage to the environment, ranging from large-scale forest fires to persistent pollution of air, soil, water, and poisoning of flora and fauna. It is especially disturbing that Azerbaijan considers a war of aggression, ethnic cleansing, and attempted genocide to be in line with international law. Today, more than ever, it is important for the international community to consolidate its efforts to prevent such irresponsible and inhuman behavior, because any reality created by the use of force cannot be legitimate. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Armenia, and I call on the representative of Azerbaijan. Please.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We would like to express our strongest protest against the right of reply of the Republic of Armenia. This statement has become a yet failed attempt to deny the true facts and mislead the international community. First of all, we urge the Armenian delegation to abandon referring to legally non-existing names vis-à-vis the territories of the Republic of Azerbaijan. What the representative of Armenia calls Nagorno-Karabakh and Artsakh is a sovereign territory of Azerbaijan, which was under unlawful occupation of Armenia for nearly 3 decades. In fact, Azerbaijan has seriously suffered from the devastating effects of the war unleashed by Armenia in the early 1990s. In its 4 resolutions, the United Nations Security Council explicitly condemned the use of force against Azerbaijan and the resulting occupation of its territories and demanded the immediate, complete, and unconditional withdrawal of Armenian occupying forces from all the occupied territories of Azerbaijan. Another act of aggression by Armenia in September 2020 became a logical consequence of the impunity that it enjoyed for 30 years. Azerbaijan launched a counter-offensive operation to liberate its territories, protect its people, and allow the internally displaced persons to return to their homes, acting in full accordance with the Charter of the United Nations and international law. At the end of the occupation of the Azerbaijani territories revealed the full extent of the ecocide, culturecide, herbicide committed by Armenia. For almost 3 decades-long Armenian occupation, the natural resources and cultural heritage of Azerbaijan has been deliberately destroyed, looted, and vandalized. The Armenian occupation inflicted massive degradation of the environment, the barbarian illegal exploitation of our natural resources. Horrific scale of destruction was committed in the occupied territories, and most parts have literally been turned into a ghost land. The acts of ecocide committed by Armenia in the occupied territories of Azerbaijan were widely recognized by the international community, including in the documents of international organizations. Among them are the United Nations General Assembly, the Council of Europe, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and so on. The way forward for sustainable social economic development in the Caucasus is to overcome a conflict legacy and build good neighborly relations in full respect for and compliance for universally agreed norms and principles of international law. The end of conflict provides a unique window of opportunities for effective regional cooperation in the South Caucasus. Ensuring lasting peace, development, progress, and good neighborliness is the basis for Azerbaijan's vision for the future.
Thank you, and by that we have